Yeah.
So, good evening, everybody. I think it's going to be a good evening. We've got another one of our NAAFI Natters informal discussions, and following up from our crappy war films, we're doing excellent war films, brilliant war films, and I've got a slightly different panel. A couple of them have joined us again. Philip Blood is joining us again from last time. So is Adam Lunny from last time. So they're back for more. Adam had to get up at a stupid o'clock in Australia for this. So well done, Adam. With our new participants, we have Sally, Robbie, Dan, and Stephen are new, and my George and Matthew, who know each other because they were in a little series you may recall from a few years ago called Band of Brothers. It's nobody knows about it. It's off the radar. But anyway, but they're going to bring some acting experience. Stephen Hall is in from the movie industry as well, director of photography, things like that. So he can put some insight in there. And we're going to discuss brilliant war films. So who wants to go first?
George. George, you're going first, mate.
Okay.
George is going first then.
Right, yes. I went for two movies by Stanley Kubrick, Full Metal Jacket and Dr. Strangelove. And I think they
put some images up. So there's a couple of them. We'll let you defend your choice in a second.
Okie dokie. Well, there we go.
Great film.
It looks like your house on a Friday night, George.
So why Kubrick then? Why those particular films, George?
Something about the absurdity of war, and I sort of the Dr. Strangelove. It starts off and it ends with the end of the world. So we have a nuclear holocaust that takes out everybody, while Peter Sellers is running around playing the American president and the Russian ambassador and what have you. And Full Metal Jacket, I think it has the best opening scene maybe of any film that I've seen, or it grabs you by the balls and it doesn't let go. And
best boot camp stuff too.
Yeah, the boot camp.
That's what. Yeah.
Is that a bit of reminiscing there, lads, from your time? Yeah. I mean,
no, I'm just wondering, George, mate, are you in the National Portrait Gallery?
I think, yeah.
Wow, look at that.
Is that a Rembrandt, mate?
Yeah.
How much they
Is
paying you?
that famous missing Rembrandt there?
Yeah.
That's very good. Can I just say about Full Metal Jacket, East London has never looked as cinematic as Full Metal Jacket.
That's a good point, Stephen, because I've read lots of people saying you can completely spot that light isn't Southern Asia. I mean, this is something you noticed that it clearly is. It's Battersea, isn't it? I think.
No, Beckton Gasworks. Yeah. I'm going to be here for 20 minutes or so, so I'm really sorry, but our diary kind of changed today rather rapidly.
Okay, well we can do
just very quickly about Full Metal Jacket. I worked on The Shining. It was actually one of the first films I ever worked on. And I got a bit of work on Full Metal Jacket and Beckton Gasworks, which is where that was shot. Kubrick hated flying. He wouldn't fly. He was frightened of flying, actually, and shot everything in the UK. Those lovely, that whole boot camp thing was RAF Bassingbourn, and then Beckton for all the Vietnam stuff. So he kind of had this thing about creating the most amazing locations within his own world, if you like. But I totally agree with the chap who just said about Full Metal Jacket. It is probably of the Vietnam era of movies. I think it's probably way up there, isn't it? There's a point for discussion. Vietnam movies, Paul. Sorry.
Well, we can do that. I mean, let's go back to George and have him expand on Dr. Strange.
Totally. Yeah,
and we'll bring you in, Stephen. Do your choices, and come back to George in a minute. And
that's very sweet of you. Thank you.
So let's do your two choices, Stephen. So they are.
Well, so my two choices are, I said to Paul, I think there are choices that people make about war films. I mean, I assume everyone I'm looking at on this screen, everyone that's listening has an interest in World War II or war films per se. It doesn't have to be World War II, but World War II seems to be the most filmed conflict in history, which I think is probably true. My films would have been some of the kind of great stoic British films like The Cruel Sea and so forth. But I actually chose one film that I'd worked on, and I have a real thing about choosing that particular film, but also a film I didn't work on, but obviously wish I had have done, which was Saving Private Ryan, which for most part, that kind of changed the way we all expect war films to be played now. Saving Private Ryan was something of a milestone in how war is predicted. It's the first time that it was predicted with the true horror of war. And I remember sitting there in a cinema and watching a screening of Saving Private Ryan and thinking, after the opening 15 minutes, I was exhausted. And I think from that moment on, we all realized that war is pretty untidy, and it's pretty noisy, and it's bloody, and it's gruesome, and it's brutal. And that had never really been portrayed properly on screen before, in my opinion. I also think it's actually quite a good story too.
It's the only war film that didn't really have any setup of characters. Normally, all the old classics, you had them getting off the train at the recruiting station, bonding, the going through the training. One has a relationship with a girl, it goes wrong, blah blah blah. But Saving Private Ryan, landing craft, boom, there you are on the beach. You have no idea who anybody is.
Amazing.
And it worked brilliantly. And I mean, as a director of photography, that whole thing they did with the washed out colors, that was brand new then, but now everybody does it now. That is now the standard.
The Band of Brothers actually did it. Of course, we're talking about almost the same factory here that produced the two shows. So there is a reference here between the two. But Paul, as someone who obviously is an expert in the Normandy landings, I would imagine that even you probably found it difficult. Did you find any holes in that that you could see weren't historically accurate?
Well, here's the thing. Not when I first watched it, no. I mean, I watched it 3 nights in a row at a cinema in Chelmsford, Essex, and it just blew me away. Of course, now, because it's when I'm on Omaha Beach, or Mag, my other half, is on Omaha Beach. If you don't mention Saving Private Ryan, one of your customers will.
Of course, yeah.
Frame of reference. And of course, now I can see that the obstacles are the wrong way round. Some of them are German bunkers, aren't exactly how they should be. There's lots of military details that aren't quite right, and the plot is absurd in the sense that they're sending a group of people from Omaha to rescue a guy behind Utah, but that doesn't take anything away from what that first 30 minutes does. And that first 30 minutes is still and will be a game changer in how people
and has been
on screen. Without that, George and Matthew would never have met, because if that hadn't been a hit, then Dale Dye wouldn't have got the gig to do Band of Brothers. Those two wouldn't have met, and so on and so forth. So we have Saving Private Ryan, just that simple debt of thanks.
I totally agree.
To get the ball rolling. But because we're going to, maybe you have to nip off, let's do your second film, which I know what it's going to be. Then we can.
I'm so sorry, but the second film is Fury, which I've 42 films I counted the other day. Actually, of the 42 films I've worked on in the last 32 years, Fury is the most divisive in so many ways. Fury it's the one film that military historians, anybody with a passing interest, and I said something to Paul on Twitter the other day, and literally my computer was full of people picking holes in it, and I totally agree. There are a number of things that are kind of inaccurate with that film, should we say. I would just say that for the 3 months I spent in the mud of Oxfordshire and the 3 weeks I spent inside a Sherman tank was pretty brutal and quite depressing. And don't forget, at the end of the day, I'm going home to my family. I have a shower in the morning. Someone comes and offers me coffee. I'll talk through that picture in a sec if you like, but to me it was a truly kind of a dramatic experience, if you like. And I know the sort of Alamo scene at the end is not is not historically accurate, and someone pointed out that they should have done this, or maybe the SS should have just gone round the tank. But when you've got studio heads that are there, they don't give a sorry, I'm going to say it. They don't give a shit about historical accuracy. They want bums on seats, and they want a big finish, and that's what they got. So that's why that end. David Ayer, the director of that film, is a lovely, lovely man, and actually is a bit of a World War II nut himself. and he was very particular about accuracy, but actually he gave up the kind of the cause, if you like, because the studio heads, it was his first big studio picture, and they were saying, you know, you've just got to make it dramatic. You've got to make it, people want to see it. So that's what happened. But
Stephen, can I ask you a question?
yes.
Am I right in saying that the discoloration that they use in both Private Ryan and Band of Brothers is called bleach bypass?
It is called bleach bypass or desaturization, yeah.
Can you talk me through how that works? Because I actually talk about it and I don't know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about it.
Okay, so let's talk about two very quick ways of making a film here. Film, you can shoot on film, you can shoot digitally. Fury was shot on film, actual celluloid film. So to do a bleach bypass on that, when you're processing the film, you put it through another chemical process. We all know how to make a photograph. You put it on developer, you stop the developer, and then you put it in a fix bath, and then the photograph comes out. It's the same with celluloid prints of movie, but in between the stop and fix, you put it through another process called bleach bypass, and it bleaches all the color away. You can do it easily. You can do it on your iPhone now. That's how easy it is. But of course, in the day, when Saving Private Ryan, I think they're almost one of the first shows to use it in a dramatic way.
And how did they stumble upon that? How did they come up? Did they reverse engineer something, or how did they come up with that?
They came up with it because the DOP had done it before and thought that, you know, war is not colourful. And I'm kind of on his side here, because if you look at a film like Longest Day, it's the same film, but obviously 30 years prior to Saving Private Ryan, in black and white. You think didn't war happen in black and white? I mean, we're all kind of slightly educated into that world of World War II's in black and white. In fact, I was watching a film this afternoon. One of our aircraft is missing. It's absolutely shocking in so many ways. Yeah. But actually, it's quite dramatic because it's so shocking. And you know, Eric Portman speaking as if he's announcing the sort of BBC News or something, and it is extraordinary. But it's in black and white, and actually, I believed it for that reason. And I think until Saving Private Ryan, if you look at other movies prior to that, where they didn't show the effect of firing a gun at someone, you know, people died, and it was all very dying. They weren't blown to pieces. I mean, there is a particular scene in Saving Private Ryan that makes me wince every time I see it, when there are some chaps on top of a tank and they get shot by, Paul, you'll tell me what it was. It was a
22mm.
There we go. And they were literally ripped to pieces. And that is what happened. So in Fury, just going back to Fury very quickly,
welcome to your film.
Yeah, David Ayer, the director, was very keen that we showed war in a way that would kind of keep up with then the modern trend of showing war. So it needs to be shown. And there are a few moments in Fury where you do stuff, and you know, years ago people would have been horrified of that, and that's actually what people are expecting now. So.
Yeah, I mean, does anyone else brave enough to say anything about Fury while Stephen?
Yeah, come on, no, I'm here.
I think the casting was excellent. You know, that I would, as for me at least, I would have loved to maybe have 45 minutes more with the crew just in the tank.
Yeah.
Because when they're in the tank, the camaraderie, the banter, it's fantastic. Like the deleted scenes are some of the greatest scenes of the film, and I'm so upset they never got in. It's when they're
that's all my stuff. Yeah.
Oh, it's such a shame. But when John Berthnell and I think it's the radio guy, maybe, they're doing that sort of hazing of the new guy.
Yeah,
that scene is fantastic. You know, the banter and the camaraderie for me is really good. I just, you know,
wasn't there an Israeli film where they filmed it inside a tank?
Yeah, we're going to talk about the picture that was shown.
Sure. So there was a picture that Paul put up, which I sent to Paul this morning. So here we go. So have a look at this. So this is what we call the Buck set. So we carried this set, would you believe, and that structure that it's sitting in. We had two locations. We had a location just outside Oxfordshire, which is all the exterior fields and all that sort of stuff. And then we went to the old RAF Bovingdon, which is in Hertfordshire, and built the German town there. So we had two main locations, and this was the interior of the tank you're looking at there. So this was our weather cover, and we would alternate between the main unit. So I'm the second unit DP. So we would alternate between shooting in there or shooting outside, depending on the weather. If there was really serious discontinuity with weather, the main unit would go in here and they'd shoot the actors in that tank. So basically that's a set in reverse. So quickly you can see the gun on the top there. That gun was a working gun, but obviously it didn't fire anything out. It just had the recoil coming in.
The recoil, correct. Yeah, okay.
So
yeah.
it's actually a scene in reverse. Now, I spent about 3 weeks, not continuously, but I spent 3 weeks inside that set in sort of 3 or 4 day stints. And I absolutely swear that if it wasn't the fact that someone wasn't trying to kill me on the outside, it would have killed me anyway, because you're contorting, you're trying to get a camera in there. Don't forget there are 5 guys in that size of place, and they're eating, dying, shitting. They're doing all that sort of stuff for days on end without even opening the hatch. And that slightly terrified me. It's so claustrophobic, and I know it's a set, and I know if I really want to get the magazine of the camera back, I can lift a panel of it out. But it is incredibly
that's interesting, because
depressing.
That classic old the Humphrey Bogart film Sahara from 1943, where it's an M3 Grant tank, but you can see that when they're filming inside the tank, it's like some set, they're about 7 feet apart.
Yeah.
And the space in this tank is like a TARDIS, and then it goes back to outside the tank when there's, and you can just, it loses all credibility when they're inside the tank, because it clearly isn't anything like a tank. But
no, but this is not about the, this is about our favorite war films and so forth. But I think the Fury did cause, I mean, a really good mate of mine is a historian, and I'm working with him at the moment actually, and he hated Fury, literally hated it, because he said, apart from the Tiger sequence where they're shooting this Tiger tank, or the Tiger tank's trying to shoot them, there were so many inaccuracies that it wouldn't have happened. People have said about the way that the crew interacted with each other is wrong, but I found that to be quite amazing actually, that the actors portrayed the terror of war in various ways, in ways that you and I'm assuming everybody that we're talking to tonight has never experienced. And it is quite interesting. Shia LaBeouf, who is, and I don't mind saying it publicly, the guy is a psychopath without question. And he literally spent 3 weeks before he had a wash. It was only after the 3 weeks that the rest of the crew said, we're not working unless he does have a wash. And he wanted to do a pure method version of what it was like to be a tank crew. And you've got to applaud the guy, because it actually looks like it as well. I mean, it really, to me, it did. They got the grime right. And again, this is all going back to Private Ryan, that before that, people went to war and they had kind of nice uniforms and they weren't dirty. These guys were grimy. This inside of a tank, Paul would probably know. I actually went in the Tiger that we used on that Tiger sequence.
Oh, lovely.
And by the way, the Tiger tank, you could have a game of football in there. It's like enormous. It's huge.
Yeah.
But you go inside that thing, you can't hear yourself breathe. It's bonkersly loud. So if you can imagine that and all that other stuff, it is going to make you disjointed, and it is going to make you a person that is slightly unstable. And certainly some of the casting got it bang on.
Well, I think we can all agree that Fury gets the portrayal of a tank crew pretty good, and the grittiness and the dirtiness, I think it gets that. But it's just, to me, I mean, it just falls down that it's that end scene. If it stopped 45 minutes before the end, I'm sure I would have thought about it more highly about it. But and the bit across the field, I mean, I guess the historian we're talking about is James, you're working with, and I know Fury divides, but I have to say I don't meet many historians who like the end bit. I mean, yeah, but anyway, Saving Private Ryan. What do we think about Saving Private Ryan, guys? I mean, it's how.
It's like 1917, isn't it? It's a great film. It's you just got to suspend your disbelief about the plot, really, haven't you?
It's a journey, isn't it? It's more of a. I mean, the whole the cowardly guy. That's a kind of a King Arthur, Luke Skywalker standard legend of someone going through experiences and becoming a better person, isn't it? And it's a pity that they hadn't based it on a real story. Me as a Normandy buff, if they had actually based Saving Private Ryan on the Battle of Lafayette, or they had done something real. But what I heard from various people is that they wanted to hedge their bets with that. There hadn't been a big budget war movie for decades and made money. So they made sure they crammed in paratroopers, rangers, gliders, Tiger tanks, SS, bridges, P-51s, everything they could possibly. I'm surprised it wasn't a U-boat coming up at some point. Could possibly get in just to kind of double down. And then, of course, from that, and it was a great success, we have Band of Brothers, which led to the Pacific, which now leading to the 8th Air Force One. So if for no other reason alone, Saving Private Ryan was a game changer in terms of getting those serious studies of combat off the ground.
Yeah, I mean, at the risk of upsetting lots of people and getting lots of flack, I don't, this is a conversation about.
Good pun there, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I'm an RAF historian now to get that one. This is a conversation about favourite or brilliant war films, not necessarily, to be brilliant. It doesn't necessarily have to be accurate. I don't think.
No, well, because things like Lawrence of Arabia would fall immediately off the list. And Paths of Glory and other films that we're not discussing tonight would just, if you're talking authenticity, they just disappear completely. So. The thing is, we also have to admit that we're in an era when you started, Stephen, in the industry, I guess people weren't within 3 months of film coming out, scanning it, looking at it, freeze framing it, going back, looking at it, zooming on it, and critiquing everything. You saw it once, the cinema, and if you're lucky, you saw it 4 years later on Christmas Day when it got shown on ITV. And you haven't got the ability to go online and look at the stills and go, he's wearing the wrong boots. So, it's a very critical era now where we can...
For a moment there, Paul, I thought you were going to say I started in the industry before people were talking on screen, which is almost true. But the thing is, so there's an interesting thing, and this was going to be my other choice of film, and I quickly mention it because it's leading on to what you're talking about here, is The Great Escape. So there has been for many, many years 3 films that people keep threatening to remake with modern CG, all that sort of stuff. One is Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, and I think the world would end if someone tried to remake Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. There's another film, and also the other film is The Great Escape. People keep saying it's a great ensemble cast. We could get all those wonderful people in it. Tom Cruise could be in it, blah, 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 Matt Damon. And you think it would destroy it. But if you look at The Great Escape, that's a point in case, isn't it? It's totally disbelievable in terms of military historians, probably in the way they're dressed.
Historians could claim that they wished the Steve McQueen scene would be moved because it's complete fiction. But if you put us on a lie detector test, we'd all be lying because we all want that sequence in, even though we know it's completely shit. A remake of The Great Escape would have to have a motorcycle jump because otherwise we wouldn't enjoy it.
I'm convinced that film made the sales of leather jackets go up 100%. He's the coolest man alive in that movie.
As Eddie Izzard says, he made it from Poland to the Swiss border in about 3 hours, on a motorbike. There's normal speed and there's Steve McQueen on a speed.
Totally. He can do no wrong as far as I'm concerned, but yeah.
But No Great Escape is a classic, and I nearly nominated it myself as my favorite film. But if you have to nip off anytime, Stephen, you please do that. But if
that's very sweet of you, but I'm loving this because I do love
it's cool.
Enthusiasm that people have. But that's thank you.
Well, I think while you're still here, I want to bring back George on about Kubrick again, because I think as anyone who's interested in photography and cinematography, you've got Kubrick is kind of up there in terms of vision, isn't he? So let's put George on. So back to your Kubrick choices. So George, I mean, is it the acting? Is it the visuals? What is it? I mean, you said the absurdity of war it shows, but what draws you to them again and again?
I guess the first thing is the script, and then how the film is made, and then the acting. I mean, they all go together, but Dr. Strangelove, I can watch it over and over again for Peter Sellers. I mean, I know what's going to happen every time, and every time he cracks me up, and then and the lines stick in my head. There I was, Jack. I was feeding you, Jack. I was feeding you. There together. And I think you sent me something about the purity of essence.
My bodily waters. My waters, I forget what the quote is now, but my waters are all fine, Jack. Look at me, Jack. I'm fine. I mean, I'm not from the industry, but Dr. Strange, there's not a word too many in that script. Every single word pushes the story on, adds something to it. There's not one unnecessary line or moment. And Sterling Hayden is the unsung hero, I think, in that film. Peter Sellers gets all the credit, and George C. Scott, but to me, Sterling Hayden did an absolutely incredible job.
Was amazing.
And
that line when he says, you know what, if you don't get the president of the United States on the phone, you're going to have to answer to the Coca-Cola company.
Yeah, and he only made, I'm being a bit of a film geek now. He only made one war film, about Fighter Squadron or Fighter Patrol or something, but he didn't make war films because he was an OSS veteran. He served in Italy and Yugoslavia in World War II and didn't want to be part of anything that made war look ridiculous, unless it was Dr. Strangelove, which was making war look ridiculous, but for a sound reason, if that makes sense. So it was the only war film he ever made, Sterling Hayden. And another story I know is he was at an Oscars for after Dr. Strangelove, he was there as a guest, and he bumped into someone, and they knew they were both meant to be at the Oscars, but they knew each other from somewhere else, and it was Anthony Quayle, the British actor, and they'd actually met in World War II on a mission in Yugoslavia with code names, hadn't met each other for 20 odd years until they met at the Oscars. Now that's an awesome story. Didn't I give you a Sten gun in April 1943 in occupied Yugoslavia? Well, yeah, I think you did, and that's how they met again. But anyway, I mean, Full Metal Jacket is also another one that, I mean, we talked about the lighting there and what have you, but Full Metal Jacket, you can't talk about Full Metal Jacket without talking about the incredible performance by Vincent, who I can never say his name. D'Onofrio. I mean, that is just, isn't that up there as one of the greatest performances on film ever?
Possibly. I mean, certainly in terms of an opening, you mentioned about the opening of Saving Private Ryan. I mean, that's the opening of Full Metal Jacket. And for how many minutes are you literally put in the shoes of recruits in boot camp? And it is brutal. Yeah, totally.
And it went with your love of Full Metal Jacket, George. I mean, did you have any kind of Full Metal Jacket moments when you were on the Band of Brothers set? Was there any kind of echoes of similarity? I mean, are Lee Ermey and Dale Dye, they're kind of cut from the same kind of cloth, aren't they? Really?
I did.
Yeah.
I've got one for you.
Go on, man.
I've got. All right, so. Every morning, back me up with this, George, because every morning you used to have to be on parade. Okay, so you had to come on parade from whatever time it was, 5:30 in the morning. And after about a week, we've all been sort of drilled up to the nines. And on about a week, Dale Dye comes out, and he's got a telephone in his hand, and he says, "Good morning, Easy." So everyone's, "Good morning, sir." So, Easy, I got a favor for you this morning. So. Yes, sir. Yeah, so we're all stood up, attention, and he says, "It's my daughter's birthday." You remember this, George?
Absolutely.
Right. It's my daughter's birthday, and I'm wondering whether you guys could sing "Happy Birthday" to her. All right. So within that cast, there's some unbelievable singers. So we burst into "Happy Birthday," and it's got like 10 different harmonies in it and stuff. And he stood kind of in front of me. And as soon as "Happy Birthday" finishes, he starts cooing down his phone. And he's like, "Did you like that, honey?" "Oh, yes, Daddy loves you." And I can feel everybody thinking what I'm thinking, which is he's a huge softie. So I'm smirking. And he stood right in front of me and he's looking down on his phone. And I'm smirking away. He's like, "Yes, well, Daddy misses you. I'm kissing. Yes, well, you have a wonderful birthday." I'm smirking away, and without missing a beat, he goes like this. He goes, "Well, I'll see. I'll talk to you later. What the fuck are you looking at?" And I shot straight out of my boots.
Great story.
He still reminds me of me. Well, I'm working with him at the moment on a book, so he still reminds me of it now.
That's a great story.
Fantastic.
That is.
Thank you.
So Kubrick. I mean, let's finish off with Kubrick yeah, George, give us something about that, your feelings about those films. What is it, what I mean, you said that Dr. Strangelove, you watch it all the time, but I mean, why is it a classic? Why did you have any hesitation choosing it for this show?
I didn't. I had more that I wanted to put on the list and I couldn't. I mean, I think Apocalypse Now was right on the borderline for me there with them as well. It's interesting. I don't know why the World War II movies didn't jump up as much in my mind as, I guess Strangelove is kind of a post-World War II, because more of a Cold War movie.
Yeah.
But also it's the visceralness of Kubrick's movies, or Full Metal Jacket, that really grabs me.
Totally. Yeah.
I mean, Full Metal Jacket, the plotting is similar to a World War II film, isn't it? With the training, a traditional World War II film. It's not. I mean, Platoon and things like Casualties of War is not really a Vietnam film. It's a rape film, isn't it? Sort of as a World War II film. So yeah, Full Metal Jacket in that sense is fairly conventional. But I mean, The Duelist as well is a war film, albeit another period. But Steve, any other before? When do you have to go, Stephen?
Supper is literally being on the table.
Well,
I'm so sorry, but it's literally.
Well, we'll leave you to enjoy your supper. And if you want to come back in later, we may still be here.
I would love to. Guys, thank you so much, and Paul, thank you so much for inviting me. And
we'll come to do something. We'll do something Fury with you in the future.
Well, that would be great. A good result against Blackpool tomorrow for us Ipswich Town fans.
Oh yeah, you're an Ipswich man, aren't you? Of course. Yeah.
Waiting for that. There's the connection.
Yeah. Well, see you, Stephen.
You can leave now, Steve. Yeah, go on.
yeah, fuck off. Now,
and whoever, sorry, I missed who it was that got up in Australia, but I'm not doing you any justice. But
that's okay. Thanks for coming.
Listen, lovely to see you all.
Very interesting.
Okay, cheers then, Stephen.
And do keep in touch, guys. I'm on all sorts of things, Twitter mostly, but yeah, it'd be lovely to talk to you again.
Right, that's Stephen gone. So who wants to go next then? Phil, Sally, George?
Yeah, should I get mine out of the way? Which one do you want
Stanley,
me to
let's go for your two then. Right.
What shall I do first? The obscure one?
Yeah, let's do the obscure one. Yeah, it's
I doubt if any of you have seen this actually. I know you have, Paul.
I have, yeah.
Dan, you probably have as well. It's called The Gentle Sex, and it's not a euphemism, but it's a World War II propaganda film. It's a Leslie Howard film, and it was made in 1943. Does it ring a bell with anyone at all?
From somewhere, I can't think where though.
Not me.
Yeah. Well, have you got any of the photographs from it? Any of the stills, Paul?
I have. I'm just trying to get it up there. I'm still trying to find. There we go. Hang on. Gentle Sex. There's the poster. And
yeah, he directed it. Yeah, I know this.
Absolutely brilliant, and it is as a propaganda film from the Second World War. I think I first saw this film when I was about 16, 17, and then studied it when I did my undergraduate degree in the early 90s, and then after that I went on to join the RAF. But for me, it was my gran was ATS Royal Signals, so she used to go on and on and on about this film all the time, and she always used to say, yeah, loads of my friends were extras in the drill scene, and when they're all getting their kit, it follows 7 women who all join the Auxiliary Territorial Service, and it's narrated by Leslie Howard, and it sounds incredibly antiquated and old-fashioned and sexist now, especially at the beginning. But it's got this all-star cast. It was a really smash in the UK, and it's very similar to You're in the Army Now, and it's our War II, which were both US films that were made about the Women's Auxiliary Army Corps in the US at the same time. So it kind of morphs into being more than a film just about women, and it's a film about the influence that they've had and the change in opinion of society to women actually being in the forces. And I read one review of it, and it said, yeah, it was all about not wanting women in the forces to appear really promiscuous or anything like that, but it's got cast members, people like the guy John Laurie from Doomed
Army, yeah.
from Dad's Army.
Yeah, he's in my film as well.
It's a real struggle. Yeah, I mean, they always highlight the struggle for freedom for generations in the future, and I've put here, yeah, love interest is the RAF pilot. It's always the RAF pilot, isn't it? A guy called John Justin, who plays Flying Officer Sheridan. And I've also put here, you know, there's at one point there's a nod to the role of women in the military during the First World War, and an acknowledgement to what it was leading to in the Second World War. And then he actually goes on to kind of talk about how people in the future will look back upon the role that these women had played. So it had a huge impact. This is my gran. So obviously she
Right.
She was so proud that her friends were in that film. She was so proud of her service in the ATS, and like I said, I went on and did 16 years. But I guess for me, because I focus a lot of my history is on trying to bring the lesser known stories of female pilots, bits and pieces that women have done, and the steps that they've made to integrate themselves in going forward into the future. It was a change. It was a moment in time where the opinion changed. And Leslie Howard, it was filmed, I think it filmed in the summer, and then he died in the plane crash when he was taken out by the Donier coming back from Portugal. Yeah. But he was killed about 2 weeks after it came out. But he finishes it off and he says, and this is my Leslie Howard voice, "Our sweethearts, mothers, sisters, daughters, we are very proud of you, you strange, incalculable creatures. The world you are helping to shape is going to be a better world because you are hoping to shape it. Pray silence, gentlemen. I give you a toast, the gentle sex." And it's such a swap from the very first clip of the film, which is it's a sampler, and it's a cross-stitch sampler, and it just says the gentle sex, and it says how meek women are and this, that, and the other, and it does a 360 and just goes, you know, these women have achieved so much. So to me, it was a really important film, not just as a propaganda tool, but just as a historical actual piece. I mean,
I would say it's important rather than good. I mean, that's it's hard to watch now because it's just they're all hello.
Yeah,
it's very stilted. It's very there's no Manchester shop girls, are there?
Yeah, no. But I mean, they're all to use it as a tool to see how much we've moved on. It is interesting, which is why
definitely,
that's why. And I guess for me, it's, oh my God, you know, I think about my gran and stuff. But yeah, everything that you just said about people getting mucky and things like that. No, it's completely disproportionate to all of that. It's completely.
I mean, it's no worse than lots of male-dominated propaganda films of the same period, where they're all exactly the same stereotypes and cliches. No, it's exactly the same. But there are list of films where it's about the war that is a full female class. It's about, you can count them on the fingers of one hand. There's So Proudly We Hail. There's Get Gentle Sex. There's another one, Nursing One in America.
Even that got Jim. Yeah, We Flew Alone. It's got Jim Mollison characterizing it, but the Amy Johnson story and things like that. Yeah, they are very staid. They're all universals now. But I think as a point of capturing the history for the future, where we were at that time, it's a good kind of chronological.
I think so. It's a good part of our history lesson. And so let's do your second film.
Okay, another one. You see, now I've picked two Second World War films, but I do like things like Black Hawk Down, which I
nearly went for that.
But there's quite a few films I've been to see, especially modern films, and having had, I wasn't on the front line patrolling or anything like that. I was at Kandahar, but we still got mortars fired at us. We were still bombed. And the sound of rockets coming in and the alarms going off and the smell of the cordite and everything. And you're running around with your rifle trying to get into a dugout just to, you know, get out the way. And it is frightening. You kind of, you operate like a robot. So there's a lot of films I'm finding now that I can actually go to the cinema and I have to almost get up and walk out. I feel really claustrophobic. Black Hawk Down made me quite sick, but it was an absolutely amazing film. But anyway, I'm going off the plot there. This is right. Appointment in London. This was before the Dam Busters. It was filmed in 1952-53 at RAF Upward, and it was endorsed by Sir Arthur Bomber Harris. And the story follows a bomber command squadron in Lincolnshire during the Second World War, and the attempts of the wing commander, the OC of the squadron, to complete his third and final tour of 30 missions, which take his count up to 90 missions. And it opens with some really amazing Lancaster footage and a raid, after which two squadron members, the Australian and a youngster called Greeno, are both awarded a DFC with immediate effect. and you get an introduction to all the main characters, and they're due to be receiving their awards at Buckingham Palace in a few weeks' time, and it's called Appointment in London because that's when they're going to go and get their DFCs. But the OC is visited by the doctor, who says, I don't want you flying anymore. So they're touching on things like not PTSD, but fatigue and
LMS and all that,
and combat stress.
Fine stress.
Dan's the expert on all of it. Yeah, but they're talking about all of this, and you know, all the guys on the squadron think there's a jinx on the squadron because everything seems to be going wrong. One of them gets into serious trouble for sending telegrams to London when he comes back from sorties, and they kind of work out that with the RAF police think that he's nesting the Germans. Everything's going wrong, but there's lots of subplots in it. There is a bit of there's a bit of love interest, and I've put here as well. There's a bit of had to put the American in because obviously it was released in the States, and it was Raiders in the Sky, and I've put for American audiences the attachment of an 8th Army Air Force observer who shows a romantic interest in the main female lead in the film. And I've said US turns up late, tries to get the girl, doesn't get the girl. I think the footage in the film is really innovative, and the aerial scenes in the dancers, I think they were influenced somewhat by Appointment in London. They're not particularly graphic. You could, a 5-year-old could sit and watch it and not be scared or anything, but they certainly set the baseline for what happened.
Someone's audio is a bit
Dambusters. Can you hear me? Am I going really funny?
A bit scratchy. Is it yours, Sally, or someone else's?
I don't think it's me. I'm not talking. Can you hear me now?
It might have been Dan. Dan's muted himself. Or George.
Oh, okay.
I can still hear it even when I was muted, so I don't think it was me.
Maybe, I don't know, whatever. Maybe it was George, maybe it was me.
Yeah. Essentially, the wing commander's desperately trying to get all his missions done, and he's told he can't fly. He's not in a fit state to fly. He disobeys his orders. He flies. The raid succeeds, and they all go to London and they get the medals. That's a very, very short synopsis of it, and it's far deeper than that. But it was good in that it wasn't too far-fetched from a book that it was actually written by an ex-Lancaster pilot who'd flown 106 missions, operational sorties over Europe. So it was based on a true story, and I guess all the love interest stuff was just to appeal to audiences. But I thought it was a really good film, and it's one that gets overlooked because it's obviously overshadowed by the Dambusters, and nobody's chosen the Dambusters this evening.
I think no one was prepared to take on the issue of the dog. I think that's everyone.
No, I know.
But open up that whole. I mean, I when you touched on the fact about the portrayal of PTSD, such as it was back in the 50s, in a different era when it wasn't fully acknowledged, because I'm kind of bringing George a bit now, because George is one of the most intelligent people I know in the world, and he'll deny, but you are, George. And you've spent most of your life living in shit parts of the world, haven't you, George, recently? So you've lived with people who suffer from PTSD, and you know people who live in war zones and have to deal with that. I mean, do you think PTSD has been tackled well on screen generally, or not? Or
I haven't seen enough movies. I haven't seen any movies where it has been. So maybe I haven't seen enough films. I think The Hurt Locker sort of got at least the, maybe not PTSD, but the ongoing SD from. Have you seen that, Paul?
Yeah, I have. Yeah,
I have as well. Yeah.
The bomb squads, or the pressure of that. Yeah,
I have a big problem with sort of applying modern diagnoses backwards in time, and PTSD is a thing that sort of came into being in the 1980s based on experiences in the Vietnam War. So yeah, I could bore everyone to tears and talk about why you shouldn't say that chap's got PTSD when you're looking at experiences from the 1940s. I know Appointment in London is one of the films that RAF veterans say that's about as close as you're going to get to the lived experience in a war film about the RAF. And it's one of the ones where they still actually had real aircraft to film and play around in. But as far as flying stress goes, yeah, it does show how it was. And of course, the other one is the American experience, is 12 O'Clock High.
12 O'Clock High, yeah. I'm nominating that on a show for History Hack later this month. I'm doing another brilliant war films with them, and I'm nominated 12 O'Clock High, and it's still used as an explanation about leadership and the burdens of leadership. So if it's still being used, it was made in 1949, 12 O'Clock High. So if it's still being used to explain the burdens of command all these decades on, it must have got something fairly right. But I think portraying men breaking up in combat, and I think that's been shown, but not the sort of and going mad. There's lots of war films of people going completely off the rocker with machine guns and stuff, but just the sort of that burden of having been to war or been in a war zone that you carry with you as sort of a subtle thing. Phil wants to say something there.
Immediately comes to mind is Tunes of Glory with Alec Guinness.
Tunes of Glory. Oh yes, of course, yeah.
Which to me is a superb film of the stress after war and the breakdown, and one of my favourite films.
Yeah, yeah. John Mills and Alec Guinness. Yeah, superb stuff. Yeah, no, that's a great.
I think,
yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but I think the problem with a war movie about PTSD is that by its nature, post-traumatic stress happens a long time after. My father came back from the Gulf War, and he'd cleaned up the Basra Road, which I don't know how much you know about this, but the Iraqi army was bottled up on the Basra Road, and the Americans flew A-10 missions and machine gunned them for 3 days solidly. And my dad, who was a medic, cleaned it up. And when he...
Don't worry, Matt. Come back later if you want to bring in or not. If you, well, there you are. That's in a nutshell.
It was never the same, and it took him a long time before you realised it. Do you know what I mean? It was years later, and then he would do what I'm doing, which would be to try and talk about it and just crack up completely. And he spent the rest of his life kind of running away from it at a great pace. And when you were talking about like the Hurt Locker, and that guy's kind of, I feel like that guy's kind of addicted to what he's doing. Do you know what I mean? And I think the only way that my old man's dealt with it ever since is, I mean, I don't even know where he is now, somewhere Sierra Leone or somewhere bonkers. His way of dealing with it is to just be in the shit constantly. Do you know what I mean? So anyway, that's a serious topic, and one that definitely needs some examination. And well, I don't think we're quite the panelists. I'm certainly not to talk about deep psychoses. Anyway, there was great choices, Sally. The Gentle Sex, I recommend everyone watches it, but be prepared the fact it is made in 1943 and it's a little bit different to a modern way. And The Appointment in London, you're right, just it doesn't get the credit that Dan Busters get, which I don't think is that good a film. There's some good bits about it. But anyway, we'll do that another show. But Adam, we're going to go into you for aviation now, because we're on the subject of aviation.
Okay.
We've just done Appointment in London. So your two nominations, you'll go for your popular one first, then we'll do your obscure one, I think. So your popular one is the ever classic Battle of Britain.
Oh, you can't see it. Battle of Britain. Didn't come up with a background green screen, you think.
I'll put the poster up for you.
Yes. And one thing I read about the trivia for the movie is that everyone calls it the Battle of Britain, which it was, but the movie is actually called Battle of Britain. So maybe that's interesting to you, maybe it's not. But this movie does come with a warning, and that if you come around to my house and want to watch it with me and start picking it to bits, I'll pause it and kick you out.
Okay.
It, for me, is one of the great all-time classics of war movies that they made. Like you said, Great Escape, Battle of Britain, Bridge Too Far. That sort of era of war movie. Excuse me. That for me is the class of movie that I enjoy the most. because in Battle of Britain, you can enjoy it. Saving Private Ryan, you can't necessarily enjoy that, but you can certainly appreciate it. And one of the best things about the movie is the music.
Yeah.
Because back then, and this is the whole era of, war movies at the time, the music was big and loud and triumphant, and you could march to it. Now, you think of a modern war movie that had the same style of music as the Battle of Britain or The Longest Day, something to whistle to or whatever. You don't get that anymore. Modern war music is
Hans
miserable.
Zimmer doesn't do singable, does he?
No.
Yeah.
No, modern war music is miserable. It's moaning, it's wailing, it's slow, it's dull. But there's nothing positive or uplifting about it. Even if you're the good guys and you win, you don't get that anymore. But strangely enough, the piece of music that everyone loves the most is the Aces High March, which they play for the Luftwaffe, which is the bad guys. And everyone says, oh, that's the Battle of Britain music. Well, it's not the movie theme. It's one of the most famous pieces from it. And, I've still got it as my ringtone. I had it as my ringtone for about 10 years. But in my previous job, when my phone would ring in the office, people would stand up and salute. Because that's the reaction that it creates. And, I was a police officer.
I didn't know you were in the Luftwaffe. Oh, the police. Forgotten about
I was in the highway patrol. Does that count?
Yeah.
Yeah, but these weren't people who loved or watched war movies, but that's the reaction that it gets. And that's really something powerful about the movie that I enjoy.
The way the music works in that film, though, it follows the plot, doesn't it? So there's the two different themes of the two different air forces, and the way the movie progresses, you get one of more of one than the other until the end, of course. Yeah.
But something that I've sort of come up philosophically while trying to do this review and rewatching it and make some notes is that if people can act, then equipment can act. So if you can accept that Michael Caine is a Spitfire pilot, well, accept that Mark 9 is actually a Mark 1. It's just a movie. Leave it alone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not the end of the world. And, if you can pick that it's a Mark 9 and not a Mark 1, that's fine. Just leave it. It's a bloody Spitfire. Appreciate it and be grateful. That's my attitude towards it.
I mean, historically speaking, if you watch the Battle of Britain and you know nothing about the battle before that film, you would know enough about the Battle of Britain to be able to have a conversation in a pub with someone, and you wouldn't be wrong, would you? I mean, there's nothing in that movie inherently wrong. The basics of the battle are there, aren't they?
And that's the thing. There are important inclusions.
Hang on. Sally or Adam's going to disagree with me. No.
There are important inclusions in the movie that allow that. You get the footage. You get the control room scenes where they're moving the markers around the table. So you see the participation of women and some of the things that they did. Obviously not all, but some. You see a Burns victim. He was actually a navigator in the Second World War, and his burns are a result of serving in the Second World War. You see a Burns victim.
My dad worked with my dad at TGB.
Yeah.
He was an electrical engineer after the war. He was working with my dad.
And if you count him as a disabled actor, but not he's the first one I can think of to get a role in a film, a post-war film. I mean, I'm not saying a Burns victim is disabled, but a physically scarred actor. I mean, there was The Best Years of Our Lives in America, where the American guy lost his hands, the Navy guy who played by a Canadian paratrooper, in fact. But the Burns victim is the only I can think of real, genuine, war-scarred veteran. Although, of course, in the Band of Brothers era, they had George, you had amputees come in to play people with legs blown off and stuff in Band of Brothers, didn't you?
Yes.
I mean, how did that all start? I mean, that's a weird concept. I mean, but I mean, what was that the first show that was or did that happen in Saving Private Ryan? Do you know?
It's in Private Ryan.
Private Ryan.
But see, that they also do it for emergency events. So if you're creating a disaster, like a landslide or a car crash or whatever, and you need to train, police, fire, ambulance, or even a mass plane crash or something like that, and you need to train emergency services when this event happens, this is how you do it. They bring in amputees for those events as well.
Yeah, well, that's. I mean, I brought another random subject there, but going back to Battle of Britain, anyone else got any opinions about that? I mean, some of you guys must have seen it when you were kids, and Phil there.
Summer 1968. Imagine me at the age of 12 playing football, and there's this enormous sound that started to rumble behind, and all the kids on the playing field stopped, and we started to look up. And there's all these aircraft filling the sky. The next thing you know, we've got Spitfires and Messerschmitts shooting past us. It was unbelievable. And then round about 5 minutes in, the local alarms started to rise. So you got the air raid sirens going off. Then the headmaster ran out of the school, and the rest of the kids came out of the school, and everybody's looking at this mayhem. And you've got all the kids running around pretending to be aeroplanes with their arms up, doing the usual stuff. Girls screaming, Messerschmitts flying over with smoke and all the rest of it. And I get home in the evening and tell my parents, and my father says, "You're a liar." That couldn't possibly have happened. You're making it up.
So
a year later, it came out. And I've still got the brochure from the first day, which has all the lists of all the people that took part and the various stories. There's a message from Dowding and His Royal Highness Prince of Edinburgh, and I've still kept it. For me, the film is just everything about those 2 years. I just love it. I love the Battle of Britain.
Yeah, well, strangely enough, it lost money at the cinema, but I think perhaps it's made it up in DVD sales since, because I think certainly in the last 20, 30 years, there's been a lot of nostalgia that's carried the movie along, whereas at the time it came out during some of the hardest fighting in Vietnam, and people weren't particularly interested in a war movie necessarily. So I guess there's it has an emotional appeal and a factual appeal, and where the balance is between those two things for each person might be slightly different. But you got New Zealanders and Canadians with their shoulder flashes. You've got the Poles. Anytime you mention the Battle of Britain on Facebook or whatever, within 3 seconds, someone comes on and says, "Don't forget the Poles." Yeah. Well, you can't forget the bloody Poles. They're all through it. Leave them alone. Just accept that they're there.
And there are at least 2 working class people in the Battle of Britain as well. I mean, I remember distinctly there being at least 2.
Yeah, but see, as an Aussie, one of the things I love about the Battle of Britain as well is all the British accents. And as much as it's probably not a common accent, I think it's Edward Fox in the first few scenes while they're still in France, before they play the Aces High March. The French are talking on the radio, and Sedan has fallen, and he says, and I won't be able to do the accent properly, but he says, "For the benefit of the uneducated, I shall translate," which to me basically says, if you're British and you don't know French, you're an idiot. Yeah. So
if you didn't learn it from matron in the dorm, it's. I mean, what can you say about Battle of Britain? It's just the classic, isn't it? I mean, it's just
and the flying is excellent as well. I mean,
Robbie, when you say something.
That's all right. No, I mean, I grew up I'm from Biggin Hill originally, and I grew up on the hill directly above the flight path. And when I was growing up, my dad would stick that movie on probably every year or so, and it was kind of it's got a special place in my heart because it's where I grew up. Like underneath that flight path, and you'd see the Spitfires going through the air show and looking up at them, and you think, oh oh my God, like these guys, they did a job, and it really just makes you, it's one of those films where you appreciate what the guys did,
Yeah.
It's one of those kind of films. And the scene where Edward Fox falls into the glass house, greenhouse, sorry, and the boy gives him the cigarettes. Amazing. Love that scene.
That's a good scene, yeah.
Brilliant scene. Oh, thanks awfully, old boy. It's a great scene,
Yeah.
And Edward Fox was in a couple of our crappy war films a couple of weeks ago, so he's made it into one of our good films now because he's redeemed himself. So
talents.
Yeah. So Adam, your second choice, and I really like your second choice. Your second choice is Dark Blue World, isn't it?
Dark Blue World. Yeah. I remember seeing this when it came out. I think I was one of very few people in the cinema at the time because it was a foreign film, but also a foreign Czech film. It's not like it was French or German, which are more common. But it's a very good movie. The young guy you see there on the screen at the moment really is the age of a World War II fighter pilot. So as much as I like the Battle of Britain, clearly Michael Caine and all the rest weren't quite that young in the movie, but this fella certainly is, and he represents that well. I generally don't like sad movies. I don't want to watch a movie and be sad about it. I want something to escape from. But this is more melancholy than just sad or miserable or any of those other variations of sad. But it goes all the way through, and you get sort of lifted up and then drop down and lifted up and drop down throughout the story. But what gets me is the dog. So I'll just say that there's a dog in it. But there's a lot of good flying in it, although it's very amazing. Short scenes. The flying in it is reasonably short because to include a Spitfire in the movie, it costs $10,000 an hour. So you needed to get your money's worth.
Yeah. But the flying scenes they use are really amazing, aren't they? The train one.
Oh, yeah. When they're attacking the train, you can see it on YouTube, other angles of that with the helicopter in the background and that sort of thing.
I know you've seen it, Sally. Has anybody else here seen Dark Blue World?
Long time ago.
I rewatched it for this.
But it was things like the training scene when they're on the bikes.
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah,
that was really true to life. The flying scenes are absolutely fantastic, and it's one of the few films I've ever seen that touches on what happened to the Poles and the Czechs at the end of the Second World War.
Absolutely.
And so angry.
And it reminds you all the way through. It just doesn't chuck it in at the end.
Yeah.
No, exactly.
Well,
I watched it I was based in Cyprus, watching it in Limassol. So I think it was in English and Czech with Greek subtitles. And there were a load of Russians in the cinema watching it with us, and everybody came out and said, wow, that was really something. We thought it was very, very good. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. It's also, I think, one of the things I say in Normandy is that it's one of my little shtick lines I say is that we only one country I maintain truly won World War II, and it was the USA. In that the USA comes out of it with an industry and the GI Bill and all that kind of stuff. Yes, they lost 410,000, but most of the other countries on the victorious side had lost a lot. Poland, Czechoslovakia, as Dark Blue World covers, I've got 20, 30 more years of communism and imprisonment. Russia, I've got decades more of that. Britain, we're economically fucked. France is blown up. Denmark's blown up. Belgium, Germany. I mean, most war films, by their nature, World War II ones end with if they even go as far as a victory, they don't show the aftermath of rebuilding. They don't show that 1 in 3 French people were homeless, that that we were on food rationing until 57, all that kind of stuff. And Dark Blue World hints at a post-war period that was not quite as shitty as the war, but was still pretty shitty for a lot of people for a long, long time. And I think that's something I give it credit for. Any other comments on Dark Blue World for anyone else?
Yeah, I think it shows the the nature of wartime relationships and the integrity or lack of integrity for those relationships. You know, because there's the lady in the house, the young fella meets her when he gets shot down. Then the other Czech fella comes along the whole time. She's got a husband who's missing, and then the husband actually turns up in the end. And so everyone has to start asking for directions. Can I still go down this road? And play it along those lines, because, you know, those things happened.
Yeah.
The music, if you compare it to the Battle of Britain, it's not big and loud and triumphant or anything like that. It's much more modern melancholy, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And they did actually use some footage from the Battle of Britain in Dark Blue World as well. You can pick out bits where they've done that. They've reused some footage.
Yeah, no, definitely.
But yeah, it's a good movie. I watched them one day after the other recently for this, just to get them in my mind again. But yeah, it's definitely a good movie.
It certainly is. So do we want to go who do we want to go with next? Anyone got a nip off early? Anyone who wants to go next? Matthew? Phil?
You mind? Yeah.
Let's do Matthew next then. Did you finish the washing machine, by the way?
Yeah, that's what you might just have heard that a second ago. I finished it, but it's vibrating really badly. So
okay.
I'm about to get screamed at to come and fix it.
So your two films, they're your classic film.
All right. So I've gone for The Longest Day and Downfall. And the reason I've gone for The Longest Day is I think I've probably seen it more than anybody on Earth in the last 2.5 years, because they play it on the bus when I do those World War II tours.
Yes. Yeah.
So they play it on the bus between Normandy and Eindhoven. And they throw it out to the clients, and they say, what do you want to watch, The Longest Day, or do you want to watch A Bridge Too Far? And everyone always chooses The Longest Day. So hence the reason that I've chosen it. And I tell you what it is about The Longest Day is that the first time you watch it, you're like, freaking hell, this is terrible. It's loud, it's annoying, it's really badly acted. I can't watch this. I used to try and put like soft silicone earplugs in because it was like dun 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 dun. I was like, you know, shut up. And then you watch it again, and you think, oh no, that bit's good. That bit's really good. And then you get over that type of acting, and you start to learn more about it, and you learn that it had like 4 different directors, one for each language, and you start to appreciate more and more like the great bits about it. And the French stuff is fantastic.
Yeah.
The stuff with the helicopter scene when they go over the casino is beautiful. That would walk into any film now. And particularly the acting in the French sections is brilliant as well. The guy, Kiefer is his name, the commando.
Image up now, yeah.
Fabulous actor, that fella. Absolutely fabulous. And I love it for all the other reasons. I love the fact that it's an ensemble piece, and I love the fact that it's big and it's overblown. But it's just a really good stab at a huge story. Do you know what I mean? And I love this stuff as well. Sorry, I'm late, Hellboy. It's just fabulous. And all the Lovitz Commando stuff is just like, as soon as it's like watching Gone with the Wind. Do you know what I mean? It's like, oh my God. And then you can appreciate just how much effort went into it, and they did the best that they could at the time. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not going to stand up against Private Ryan. It's not going to stand up against these modern war films, but for what it was at the time, it was great. And the French stuff, I think, is really innovative. I think it's beautiful. All the attackers.
A lot of it was in Normandy. The stuff in Normandy is excellent.
Yeah, just beautiful. Yeah, just fabulous. And also, I like it because, and forgive me, I'm doing this on purpose, Richard Burton, who's in it, clearly he's in this ensemble piece, didn't realize he wasn't going to be the star of the film. So when he's on screen, he takes as long as he possibly can to say every single line, which I love when I watch it. There's the scene, I can't forget the name right. The guy comes in and says, oh, Johnny, have you seen Dave? He's like, yes. Well, where is he? At the bottom of the ocean. And it takes so long. Over Calil. It takes so long for him to get to the. I swear, an extra dies of old age in the back, and they have to replace him. Do you know what I mean? His chute never open. It just goes on, but I still love that. Do you know what I mean? I don't know about the specifics of it. I love Bob Mitchum as well. Fantastic in it as well. Fantastic. I love that. All his stuff and just yeah, it is far better film, I think, than you think it is. When you look back on it, and you're like, God, this is hammy and overblown, and all the like the artistry and the equipment, and it must have just been a hell of a job to get all that stuff. Yeah. Because then George can back you up here, back me up here. When you shoot something like a Band of Brothers or something, what you're actually shooting is this. Do you know what I mean? And then you fill the rest in with CGI. Do you know what I mean? You're shooting the other fellow that was on guitar, shoot a bit of a tank and a guy with a weapon, and everything else in the background is just like people walking around with coffee, and they just blank all that out. So if you've got just a sweeping panoramic shots like you had in The Longest Day, it must have been a hell of a job to choreograph them and not have, one guy in the background titting around or holding his rifle wrong or not marching correctly or any of that stuff. It's a hell of an achievement, I think.
It is. I mean, my opinion on it is it's a pity that so many of the British scenes seem to be there for comic relief. We get the Sean Connery doing his and Kenneth Moore hitting the universal carrier, while the Americans get the chance to be all earnest and brave on Omaha Beach and open up the exits and do that. And apart from the Pegasus Bridge sequence, which everybody knows watching this, of course, Richard Todd, who played John Howard, had actually been on the bridge on D-Day as an officer in the 7th Parachute Battalion, so made sure that sequence is pretty damn good. But there are some really sticky, bad kind of almost carry-on comedy bits that Michael Medwin, the actor, about talking about his missus being pregnant. I hope she's all right. It's just that's awful.
The terrible Sean Connery on the beach.
Sean Connery. It takes an Irishman to play the pipes. He says in his Scottish accent.
Yeah.
Oh God! But
it's a hell of a man. Yeah, and the stuff with the chaplain as well. She's down the crows, but that was just how like English people acted at the time. But some of the Americans as well, the GIs on the ship, when he's thrown up into his helmet and stuff, that's appallingly overacted as well. But
yeah,
I don't know. I can get. You have to watch it 20 times in a 1 year period, and then you get over it, and you start to. The French stuff's great.
It's a curate's egg to me. There's a lot of good, and there's a lot of mediocre in it. Anyone else, Dan, Phil? Anyone else want to comments on Longest Day?
When it first came out, there was a feeling of I'm going from the British Legion in Manchester. There was a feeling that it was anti-Montgomery, and a lot of veterans said they wouldn't go. I remember my great uncle Jim from the 7th Armoured Division refused to see it.
Yeah, that Montgomery's because the Eisenhower. Everyone knows the Eisenhower story about how the guy. If you don't know, I'll tell you. Okay, I'll put it on me. So the big role, what they wanted The Longest Day was for Eisenhower, and they asked various actors, including John Wayne and Charlton Heston, but they said to them, "But you'll have to take your toupee off, your syrup off." And John Wayne said, "I'm not taking. I don't wear a wig." And so none of them wanted to take their wig off. And no one wanted to do the Eisenhower role. And Daryl Zanuck is in his office on the phone to someone saying, we haven't got an Eisenhower yet. And a guy comes in to paint his office. And the guy who came in to paint his office was a guy who was a 20th Century Fox set painter who was not on a film, but he was painting Daryl F. Zanuck's office. And he went in there, called Henry Grace, his name was. You see his name in the cast, the crew list of things like the Searchers. And he looked a lot like Eisenhower, and Daryl Zanuck said, "Hang on, I think I found my Eisenhower." And he got on, and that's how Henry Grace got the job as Eisenhower, because he looked a lot like him, and he was a non-actor. He was a painter, and in the end they reduced his role to that one line. He literally has to say, "Okay, I think we'll go," and he's only got those like 6 words to say, and he fucks it up. And he goes, you're going to imagine the director going, "No, all you're going to say now, Henry, is." "Okay, let's go." And he kind of must have tried it. "Okay, let's go." No, not like that. "Okay, let's go." And even the take they got must be the one they went, "Okay, well, we'll have to just go with that," because I don't know how long they've been going. But he says it really, really, really badly. But it meant they brought another character, the Leo Genn character, do lots of the exposition by the map, because that was going to be done by the Eisenhower fake character, but because he couldn't act, they had the exposition done by someone else, and Eisenhower just had to just do that one scene. Anyway, that's why it wasn't the proper actor, because no one wanted to take their wig off. And afterwards, John Wayne, when he saw it, wished he'd taken the Eisenhower role on and had taken his wig off, because he said it would have changed the last 15 years of my career, because it had finally come off and I could just accept I'm a bald man and be done with it. And he took the role of Colonel Vandervoort, who in fact the real colonel he played was 27 years old when he was on D-Day, and John Wayne was twice that. Anyway, that's my Longest Day story. But any other feelings about the Longest Day before we move on to your second choice?
Yeah, I was just going to say, John Wayne can't act, and he got plenty of time in the movie.
Yeah, well, he can act, but he just acts in a John Wayne kind of way, doesn't he? Yeah,
he's very good at being John Wayne.
Yeah. But your second choice was Downfall, wasn't it, Matt?
Yes.
So I mean, there's no arguments with you there. I don't think it's.
Well, there's a director, I think his name was Paul Thomas Anderson, and he got in trouble at an awards ceremony for saying that he felt sorry for Hitler in the bunker. But it was after seeing this film. And there was a whole big furore as if he was like a Nazi sympathizer or something, but he wasn't. What he'd just seen this film, and this phenomenal actor, Bruno Ganz, who plays Hitler, it's hard not to feel for him because he's so brilliant. And there's the great thing he has with his hand, with his Parkinson's disease. And I mean, he's a wonderful actor anyway. If you've seen him in anything else, if you've seen him in Wings of Desire and stuff, he's a brilliant actor. But the reason I chose it is because there's a particular scene in it in which Goebbels' wife kills all 5 of their children, and she poisons them. So one of the kids has kind of got a sixth sense that something's going to happen, and so she poisons that one first, and she puts a cyanide pill in each of their mouths and crushes their teeth into it, and they each, however cyanide kills you, they each die, and then she walks out into the bunker, and she's got a deck of cards, and she just starts playing with the cards like this, and dealing these cards out with this kind of like stoic look on her face. And in the cinema, I just had a baby. Like, I think my baby was about 3 weeks old. I just erupted crying. And the reason why that's important is because there was a guy sat in front of me who obviously just couldn't handle it. And it then cut from that scene to Bruno Ganz walking along with his hand going like this. But he had it behind him like this. I can't really do it because he had his behind his. And right after this scene, which just blew me away, this guy leans over to his wife and goes, "It looks like she's picking his arse." And I just tapped him on the shoulder and I was like, "Can you fuck off out of here, please?"
Yeah.
I was like, what is wrong with you?
I mean,
I thought it was relevant for people.
Bruno Ganz died this
for people who, yeah, he did. It was a terrible shame.
And I couldn't believe that in all the newspaper headlines, all they talked about was the fact that Downfall spawned that meme, that the Hitler going into rage, which, strange enough, is still usually funny, even though I've seen about 20 different versions of that, from football teams to this, that, and the other. But I hope that isn't what Downfall will be remembered for 20 years from now, that it literally just spawned memes, and we will remember that it actually had a lot to say. And I think you're right. It's a brave thing to say, Matt, that it actually, I think you feel empathy for Hitler, not sympathy. You feel,
I think what you feel is that he and everybody with him has fallen to hell, and they've all gone completely insane. You know, years previously, they're in this hellish reality, and they're being shelled by the Russians, and it's this hell that they've created themselves that they're trying to brave by having parties and pretending nothing's happening. And it's like, what have you done? What have you done? Just listening to your crazy rhetoric and believing your own crazy crap. Look at the insanity that it's created, and now you're stuck in this weird underground bunker, and hell is coming for you. Do you know what I mean? And it's I don't know whether you feel empathy or sympathy, but you feel the kind of, it is empathy. You feel empathy with like, how are you getting out of this one? What have you done? Do you know what I mean? What have you all done?
the fact that the killing and the killing of her kids, like the Goebbels scene, that's all documented, isn't it? I mean, that movie was based on the people who were there in the bunker, and I'm not a great expert on those. Phil, you probably know more about that than the rest of us here. I mean, it's fairly accurate, isn't it?
I think the film is based on Joachim Fest's book, and obviously that came from Hugh Trevor Roper's book, The Last 10 Days. They kind of follow each other in the same pattern. It's very accurate, even down to the commanders of the garrison in Berlin, like Weidling, and there's also Munker, who's the SS bodyguard commander. So the details is really incredible. What I found interesting was they actually went to the point of showing how the punishment squads were running through the streets of Berlin in all this chaos and madness, and were executing people that they designated as cowards or traitors or resistance, whatever. And they were literally, with all the fighting going on, they're killing each other. So the madness it's not just against the Russians or how they're going to survive this or how they're all going to take suicide, or they're all going to party while the shells are coming down. But you've got these other head cases running around trying to kill each other. It's just an amazing story.
Yeah. That stuff with the deaths, the guy, hanging people, the big fat guy hanging. Just like, what are you doing? Yeah.
I mean, if you put that whole downfall situation into like a fictitious movie, like a Star Wars thing, people would say it was unbelievable. That if they had a scene on the I'm not belittling, I'm not comparing the Nazi Empire to Star Wars, but if they had a scene on the Death Star when everything's going wrong of people shooting each other for cowardice, we'd just say it was ridiculous. But those last few weeks and months of the Nazi regime were just everybody's turning on each other, and I mean, just an insane period of history. And Downfall, I think, sheds a brilliant light on it, even though it's an uncomfortable watch. And with your choices later, Phil, we've got some uncomfortable watches coming up with your choices. War films can be brilliant in an entertaining kind of Battle of Britain kind of way, and they can be brilliant in a sense of they change you permanently, which is more like the Kubrick kind of films. Full Metal Jacket is kind of hard watching at point. It's not you don't enjoy watching Full Metal Jacket. And Dr. Strangelove, it ends with the world ending. So I mean, hey, it's not a joyous film to end up with destruction of mankind, although you've had a good laugh along the way. So
I mean, I would add that I think it was very good that the German film industry made that film.
Yeah.
Because it actually, advertised, promoted, stated that Hitler's dead. Yeah. That these lunatics went crazy and they're all dead. Obviously, there's obviously all these conspiracy theories that he got out and went to Argentina and all of that rubbish. But to actually show that in film and have the books and have the whole record of all of that taking place, I think was very good for Germany itself. Never mind just making the film for entertainment purposes or as it became. It's actually telling a very specific story that's very important to modern post-war German culture.
And it wasn't the first film to talk about. There was The Last 10 Days with Alec Guinness. The Americans made a film with Richard Basehart about Hitler. There'd been another one with Anthony Hopkins. And it wasn't the first one, but it was the first German-made one. The others have been made by... The Alec Guinness one was a completely British-made one. So it was right that the Germans made their own movie and said, look, we're going to tell it warts and all, and here it is, and just deal with it. And any other comments from anyone? Sally, Dan, George, anyone else want to say anything about Downfall?
I'd just like to add one thing, and that is it goes back to your meme comment, that it's all kind of these funny memes. And that is that from an acting point of view, to have a German guy play Hitler, there was only one guy who's ever going to do it, and that was Bruno Ganz, because he's one of the best actors that's ever lived. And that is, it was unbelievably difficult for him to do that and for it not to be comic at any point.
Yeah.
At no point do you think this is a funny Hitler. Do you know what I mean? Because anybody pretending to be Hitler now is funny. Do you know what I mean? It's a brilliant piece. He holds the equilibrium of Hitler perfectly, and he's freaking out, he's screaming, and he's throwing stuff around. And at no point do you think, what a tit. You just think this is Hitler losing his shit.
Yeah, it's brilliantly
It's a
nuanced.
phenomenal performance.
Yeah, it really is incredible.
It's for me, like we were doing year 9 history at school, and one of the two films that we watched about the Second World War, one was Schindler's List and the second was Downfall. And when I was watching it, no, apart from me, being a bit of a history nerd at school, all the kids around me were kind of like, you know, being loud and whatever, not really watching. But the scenes where they start killing each other, and the scene where the kids get the cyanide poisoning, it was silence in the room. And I don't remember if it was my history teacher or someone sitting next to me. They were just like, "Oh my God, they killed them! Like they didn't have to do that. They could have survived the war. Those kids didn't have to die for the mistakes of their parents." And I think until maybe the last half hour, no one was taking it seriously. And then there was that switch, and everyone in the room was like, "Wow, this actually happened. This was serious stuff." And that always stuck with me, really, for the power that movies can have. At times, you know, we all kind of go to cinema to have a good laugh, but there are those certain films that you can sit down and you can go, actually, you can learn a good thing from, not a good thing, but you can learn something that will affect you mentally from a movie. And I think Downfall is one of those films that you have to see if you want to learn about the complete craziness of that last period in Berlin. It's for me, it's that film. That's the one film I'd point people towards.
Yeah, and there was a debate on Twitter today about, can a war film ever be anything other than a war film when you're talking about authenticity. But I think Downfall to me is a film that absolutely straddles authenticity, entertainment, I'm using it quote unquote, and a very watchable but horrific film. It covers all three things very, very well. Yeah, and amazing. I think that dovetails nicely into Phil's choice, I think. Therefore, we can lighten things a little bit more with Dan and me. But
guys, do you mind if I leave? I've got to go fix a washing machine.
Yeah, if you want to stick, if you come back half an hour later, we might still be here. But thank you very much, Matthew, for doing that. And yeah, brilliant choices. Thanks very much, Matt.
Great. Pleasure to meet you all. See you later, fellas.
See ya.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, Matt. Had problems with his washing machine yesterday. So I think George has gone for a cigarette. I'll be back later on. But Phil, let's do your choices, because they are there. Which one do you want to start with?
So you want some gloom now? Like, we've not had enough gloom. We're going to have some really serious gloom. The first film is Come and See from 1985, which is based on a book that was written in 1975. And I'm saying the English translation here, I Am from the Fiery Village. And it depicts life in Belarus, in Belarusia, during the Second World War and under the Nazi occupation. And there's a young boy, Flora, who joins the Belarus partisans. And this film is intended as an anti-war film. But all the way through, you're going through a process of almost experiencing what it was like for people under German occupation in Belarus. And so you have scenes which are, well, they're quite mad. I mean, you have Mad Max moments, you have Apocalypse Now moments, you have Night Porter type moments. I mean, they're obviously taking ideas from 1970s, early 80s films, but they're trying to portray the horror, the sheer horror of occupation in this area under the Nazis. And of course, one of the primary fighting forces that was operating in this area against the Belarus partisans was something called the Dillawanger Brigade. And they were commanded by a chap called Oscar Dillawanger. And he was a very strange individual. He was born in 1895. And he'd been allowed to put together a unit which originally was made of so-called poachers and illegal criminals and people taken from concentration camps and given a second chance. And then later they were bolstered by German army soldiers who had been cashiered but allowed to have a second chance. And so all of these units were set to combating the partisans in Belarus and were allowed free agency. They could literally do whatever they like. And this film portrays what happens when this young boy and his partisans engage with these Germans. And the Germans arrive in it looks like carnival. You've got crazy vehicles, you've got mad people running around, and it looks like a carnival that suddenly hits a village, and then they start killing people, burning people in the church. And then this carnival disappears, and you see them grab a girl and take her into the back of a truck, and a group of soldiers are raping her. They're madly running through the street, through the main street of the village, stealing cattle and what have you. And after the experience of watching what this film is, about 2 hours, an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, it's quite a shock. It's horrific. And many people have said to me, well, you know what, is this a horror film or is this a war film? And for me, it's always been about the horror and the psychology of actually living under Nazi occupation in Belarus in that period between 1941 and 1944. Mm. And just to give you an idea, and I took some notes, 626 villages were totally destroyed in that area, with all the civilians murdered at the same time. And then another 6,000 villages were destroyed, with many of the inhabitants either being murdered or sent to slave labor in Germany. So if you just imagine, you know, an area the size of probably England losing that much villages and community, you could see the social impact, the psychological impact on the community. And this film is reflecting that horror.
I mean, I had 4 panelists nominated Come and See. It was the most popular film nominated for this show. Matt wanted to nominate Come and See, which says something. I'm not sure what it says, but it says something. I've only managed to watch it without skipping through bits once, and then I've watched it 2 or 3 times, and I've kind of had to fast forward through bits because it is truly horrific. And I think that point about it, because it comes up in best lists of horror films as well,
right?
Interestingly, but it is obviously a war film. But I think it's horrific to us because we're a Western audience whose view of war is a little bit nicer than that of the people in Belarus and Ukraine and Lithuania. So for them, they probably feel it's more of a normal, because they understand their history. I mean, the only other one I can see that's similar is the one with Daniel Craig, the one about the
Defiant.
Defiant. But it doesn't go anywhere near as out there as Come and See. But it kind of touches on the same part of the world and roughly. And there's a few Russian movies about it. But Come and See. I mean, the story behind the making is the young lad playing the boy. He was it was a bit of a cruel experience. The director was a bit horrible to him, and he didn't act for like 15 years after it because it was just such a brutal, horrible experience making it. They wanted all these genuine reactions. But what do other people think about Come and See?
Oh, it's not a movie you enjoy.
No,
it's miserable, and I think that's the whole point.
I mean, I think maybe it does its job so well, it's so off-putting, some people won't even watching it. That's I think you made the point there, Robbie, about you could show Downfall in a classroom. Yeah. I don't think you could show Come and See in a secondary school. I think you'd get people, not in Britain or France or America. People would just be writing letters to their parents. You showed my child what with what, but so maybe it goes a bit too far to be universally appreciated. I don't know, but the fact it got 4 nominations, I think, tells something about its power. And Philip, another reason is that you've actually been to that part of the world and studied that stuff a little bit as well, haven't you? So
well, for my research, for my PhD research, I was looking at German anti-partisan warfare, what they called from 1942 Bandenbekämpfung, and the areas that I picked on were Eastern Poland and Belarus. And the first time I went was to just literally see the conditions that the the fighting and the combat was taking place in. So there was forests, swamps. And then the second time when I went in 2009, I was examining and following a Luftwaffe security battalion's movements in that area and started to follow individual soldiers. So I was actually going into the swamps. And what horrified me, I don't know if you remember, there's one point in the film where he's with the girl and they go into forestry and there's swamp everywhere and water. And when I first saw the film, I thought, well, how would that work? Well, of course, when you're there, when you're in that area and you actually go through those forests, it's incredible. 1 minute you're going over plateaus and undulating ground, which has been caused by rain erosion, which spins through the thick forest wilderness. And then you've suddenly faced in these plateaus have been turned into swamps and they're thick with mud. So you can be merrily running along, going up and down, thinking that you're pretty much kicking a straight path, and you suddenly go down to your knees in mud. And it's actually quite hard to come out of it. So I was talking to a friend about this last night, and he remembered the point where they're washing through the mud, which is on top of the swamp that's thick, like a layer of thick mud. And the boy and the girl are going through the mud and trying to push it away. And I've actually walked in that, and it is actually unbelievable.
Wow.
And the troops, the German troops and the partisans are conducting themselves in this environment, as well as in the hearts of these forests, you have small villages. And so a lot of the villages with the men going to the partisans are left with just the women. And of course, I discovered again recently that the wailing of the women, which is so important in the film, is actually an indicator of how the Russian people responded to terror. Because if the women wail and complain and make noise, the Russian authorities wouldn't shoot on them, wouldn't fire on them, wouldn't bully them. And what it shows in the film is that the women were trying to respond to the German aggression by wailing and screaming. But of course, the Germans didn't understand the meaning. And for somebody like Oskar Dillewanger and the Dillewanger Brigade, they just pushed people into churches or shacks and just destroyed them. And the interesting thing about those houses, there are still some of those houses still in situ in the forests, and that they're incredibly warm, they're incredibly comfortable. So to actually burn them down, as far as I could see, you would have to go to a great deal of effort to destroy them. You don't just put what is it in Vietnam, a Ronson against the thatch and it all goes up. I don't think that could happen. You would have to pour benzene or petrol over those buildings to burn them down. And it just struck me that, there was a whole story going on there, which when I first did my PhD thesis, I was more into doctrine and dogma and the usual things of operations of anti-partisan units and people like Bach-Zelewski shifting his sphere of activities across that part of the world and then finally ending up in Warsaw. In the second book, when I was looking at a security battalion of ordinary soldiers, I could actually engage with that terrain and look at the nature of the terrain, the people, the civilians, looking at the community. And it's a very complex environment and community. It's nothing like the Germans imagined it, that these were simple peasants living a simple lifestyle. It's a very complicated society. And another aspect of the film which is left out, which is critical to the area, is the religion. Now, in Come and See, they leave religion out as Soviet anti-religion, anti-religious dealings. But in that community, the priests were incredibly important. And the Germans tried to use the priests as collaborators to negotiate with local communities, mostly to get work out of them. So, of course, during the day, the priests are working with the Germans to keep them off their people. and in the evening they're supporting the partisans. So
Yeah, I think it's a pity Stephen, the director of photography, isn't still here, because I think the most notable thing about Come and See is actually not the photography but the sound. To me, it's a soundtrack. That bit that the flies, you hear the flies a good 5 minutes before you get that scene, and it's building up in the background, this noise, and you don't even know what it is. The first time you're watching it, you think, is my speaker humming badly? And then you realize and the sound continues after scenes have ended and begins before scenes. The sound editor did a really brilliant job on that. I think. We could spend all day talking about Come and See. George, were you going to propose Come and See? Was it one of your films, George? I forget now. No, I can't remember who was.
Wasn't one of mine.
It was Matthew then. But have you seen it? Dan, you've seen it. Sally, have you seen it?
No, I don't think I have.
Yeah, it's.
I think I have. When did it come out?
1985.
I wouldn't have done because I was only. No, I haven't.
Well. Let's move on to your second choice,
don't I?
Phil. So your second choice is Schindler's List. So everyone knows Schindler's List. But you knew the author of the book, didn't you, Phil?
Well, in about 1990, I met him, and I didn't meet him because of Schindler's Ark. The original book was called Schindler's Ark.
Yeah.
I met him because he had written a book about the Confederates, which was on my university reading list. And I thought, an Australian writing about the Confederates, he would be somebody to go and listen to. So I went to listen to this. And of course, the whole talk was about Schindler's Ark, and I was utterly fascinated. And the nice thing about Thomas Keneally is he spent an awful lot of time with people afterwards. And I was on the cusp of thinking, should I do mainstream research or whatever, part-time, what have you? And so I sat talking to him, and he made a very interesting remark. He said, when you're looking at Oscar Schindler, you're looking at what the Holocaust really is something important to think about. And that is the choice that you have in front of you. You have unlimited power, you have godlike status, you have no laws, you have no control. You can, if you wish, live the life of, I don't know, king, whatever.
Yeah, self-appointed king.
And Schindler makes this rational decision to go against the Holocaust. And of course, if you look at his past, he's not much different from Oscar de la Venga. They've both got checkered pasts leading up to the Second World War. And they're both on the edge. And these two men go into the East, and Oskar Schindler's in Krakow, and he has the opportunity to use his industrial skills for his own benefits. But Oscar de la Venga, who goes to Belarus, he's got a university degree, he's got a doctor of politics. He's got all the things that would say to him as a German soldier from the First World War, I shall control myself. Of course, he gets into Belarus and goes absolutely crazy and berserk. Whereas Oskar Schindler, he's got all these opportunities and more, and to even benefit from it and take the corruption. He's a bit like that American Civil War thing, the carpetbagger. He can go there, he can use and exploit, but he doesn't. And that's the difference between the two men, the two Oscars. One refuses the temptation and eventually saves these people. I think it's a marvelous story about the Holocaust. Obviously, there's images in there that Spiegel uses to magnify the impact of the Holocaust. And the first thing that I always notice are the stamps when they put the tables out and they put the stamps down for the German bureaucracy with the German train and all the rest of it. That's setting a tone of how this is going to be. Organization, structure. I mean, it's such a contrast with Come and See, where there's madness and chaos, and here there's organization, there's industry, there's thought out processes. This has all been worked to a plan, a series of plans, which is first to put the Jews into ghettos, and then eventually, following the Wannsee Conference agreement, they're going to gas the Jews in the various camps. And we see there's one point in that film where I think all the women are put into a gas chamber, and everybody's in the cinema thinking, "Oh God, it's going to happen," and water comes out instead of gas.
Yeah,
and I think that kind of process only Spielberg could do. But I think although he has used those methods to enhance the quality of his film, I think it helps us better understand the Holocaust as industrial genocide better probably than most films on including things like the Holocaust program series that came out at the late 70s.
What are other people's feelings about Schindler's List? Anyone want to say anything about it?
It's just, it's one of those films again that I'd pick up. It's, if you want to learn about man's inhumanity to man, just because someone follows a different god to you, then it's the film, isn't it? You can't, there's nothing you can say that's negative about it. And even the performances in that movie, I feel, for me, some of the greatest performances in cinema. You look at Ralph Fiennes as Amon Goth. I mean, that's chilling. It's very, very his performances, it's close to kind of, I won't say black comedy, but there's some lines in there you think he's playing with that script. He's walking a very fine line, and you've got, I could go on for hours about that, just choosing him and, the weight he put on, things like that. And his scenes in particular, that they just really stick with me. He's like one of the, I think I've seen him on lists of some of the greatest movie villains. Even though he's a true character, true person, he does feature on these lists of like he's a super villain almost. It's it's just chilling. It always sticks with me. If it's on the telly and I pop in halfway through, it stays on no matter when, because it's just one of those films you just have to witness it. I don't think you enjoy it. You witness that film.
Yeah, it's a necessary film to watch, isn't it? If you want to understand World War II, as much as you can enjoy your Battle of Britain, The Longest Day, Schindler's List, like come and see the other side of things, aren't they? They're that. Yeah. So let's move on to either Robbie or Dan. Who wants to go next?
Can I have a bash?
Yeah, sure. Let's go.
Okay, so I mean, I've got a couple of points that I think people have touched on during the talk so far. Is one of the things that I think is films, you can get more about the time the film was made rather than the time that the film is set in the actual story. And the other important thing is, I think that viewers bring their own ideas to the film, whatever it is you're watching. And as far as that goes, you can rewatch a film and film's meanings can change. I've sort of, I think both mine are a bit weird depending on how you define a war film. The idea I had was to try and, just thinking about the idea that war films are not only about the military perspective. I mean, the other films we've talked about this evening are also picking this up. War's not just a military experience now. Total War, you have civilian experiences as well. So I've picked two films that are kind of both adaptations, and they both have, again, as people have talked about, they both have sympathetic Germans in. So my first film is The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, which came out in 1943. It's a Paul and Pressburger film. We were talking about colour earlier on, and this is hellishly vibrant Technicolor. It was one of the main selling points of the film. Stars Roger Livesey as Colonel Wincandy, who was based on David Lowe's character of Colonel Blimp. Then there's Anton Walbrook, who was an Austrian actor, and of course Emmerich Pressburger was Hungarian. So here we've got Laurie, who we all know as Sergeant Wilson from Dad's Armies. And then the female love interest is Deborah Carr, and she gets to play three roles in this because it's an interesting film. I mean, Powell and Pressburger films, their story, their cinematography are incredible, and here they're also playing with colour as well. So But the way the film works, the plot, it's framed at the start and the end by events in, I think it's 1942, 1943. But then immediately the film goes back to explaining how Clive Wincandy became Colonel Blimp. And unlike David Lowe's cartoon character, he is actually a war hero. He won a VC fighting in the Boer War. And the film then goes to 1902, and we see him mixing it up and having a duel with Theo, Anton Walbrook's character, in Berlin in 1902, and they become firm friends. The film then moves on to 1918, so we get a bit of the First World War. And that's really interesting, looking at what people imagine the First World War was like during the Second World War.
Yeah.
And then it returns to the end in 1942, 1943. So the bit that's really interesting for me is the story that they're trying to get across. Now, I mean, Sally talked about 1943 propaganda films, and this is I mean, it has a propaganda message and it has an important message. And I need to do a little bit more reading into it, but I have read in I think it's Michael Powell's memoirs that he said that Churchill didn't like the film, and the Ministry of Information didn't like the film, and I'm not sure whether it was sort of just spin to try and make it popular in the UK and the United States to say, this was a film they didn't want you to see, or whether they generally didn't want it to happen, and it got pushed through. I think it was Rank who released it that put up a lot of the money and pushed it through. But the story it tells is, it's in the context of total war. And Clive Wincandy, the Colonel Blimp character, he's a traditional sort of officer and a gentleman. He's a sportsman, and he fights with honor. He fights a duel with his best friend, a German soldier, and he's really. It's part of his makeup that he thinks that the British should win wars by fighting honourably. And again, like films that we have in the 1940s, there is the long monologue to camera, and this time it's Anton Walbrook as Theo who gives a piece to camera, and it's quite a long shot, long scene in the film, explaining that just how awful Nazism is, and the only way to fight and win is to also, gloves are off. This is total war, and it really needs to be done. The Allies must win at all costs. So it starts out satirising the old guard, and in some instances possibly Churchill. But for me, the story that comes across, if you ignore the love triangle, which is always there as well, is this idea that I think it still resonates today, that people think that the British Army were a group of bumbling amateurs, and this film tells a story that even by 42, 43, the British Army wasn't. They were professionals, and they were willing to do what was necessary to win the war, and it was important that that's what they did.
My take, sorry to interrupt, my take is that speech by Anton Walbrook. And the interesting thing about his character is, in the early part of the film, he doesn't speak any English. So he only says good evening and hello. So as you watch the film, he learns to speak English. And then he delivers, to me, as resounding a killer punch against the Nazis as Schindler's List does, with its whole actual portrayal of the horror. Yeah. That his speech is just as chilling, just as effective at explaining what the Nazis is all about as Schindler's List. It's incredibly well done, and you can't go wrong with Powell and Pressburger, can you? For goodness sake. I mean, it's the red shoes.
Yeah, I mean, he explains this is not a gentleman's war. This is a life and death struggle with your backs against the hordes of barbarism. And it's interesting because he is a sympathetic German character, and he ends his speech by saying, "You mustn't mind me, an alien, saying all this, but who can describe hydrophobia better than one who's been bitten and is now immune?"
Yeah, incredible.
Yeah.
And your second film is is again a slightly odd one, but yeah.
Yeah. So my other one is Jojo Rabbit. Again, it's it has a sympathetic German character in it. It's not a traditional war film. We've already talked about portrayals of Hitler, and I think it is more usual now to have Hitler as a comedic character. But of course, there's a long history of Hitler being portrayed comically. Think Chaplin's Great Dictator and The Producers. I've been looking at Bugs Bunny Looney Tunes, and I came across a failed sitcom, Heil Honey I'm Home, that was never got past the first episode, thankfully. But the thing that is, I mean, again, it's an adaptation from the book Caging Skies, and it leaves the plot quite quickly. It is the story of a young boy who was a fanatic Nazi. He's in the Hitler Youth, and his mother is a much more sensible person, and he's hiding a Jewish girl in the attic, and he finds out. He realizes that if he shops this girl, then him and his mother are for it as well. And some people have just sort of written it off as a weak coming of age film, and I don't think it is that. I think it is saying it's got a powerful message to it, and as I said, I think you read into it what you will, but in today's society, I think this film gets across the horror of war when it has to, but it also sort of explains how it is possible for people to be indoctrinated in fairly evil practices, and they think they begin to accept it and think it's normal, and Jojo is forced to confront what he thinks is true. And there's the wonderful scene at the end where he kicks Hitler out the window and says "fuck off." I don't think it happens often enough in films.
And the child acting is incredible. Him and the kid playing Yorkie is really.
Yes.
I mean, I watched it again a couple of weeks ago. I've watched it 3 or 4 times now. I watched it in the cinema, and you go. It's one of those films. I had zero expectations for it. I went into 1917 expecting a lot. I went into Dunkirk expecting a lot. Jojo Rabbit was like, it's a comedy with a guy who has an imaginary friend called Hitler. It's like, okay, I don't know what to expect. And I went in, and I went with 3 or 4 of my tour guide pals from Normandy. We all thought it was brilliant. I mean, to get to balance that line between broad comedy and actually saying an important message about warfare, you could have easily got it wrong.
Yeah, definitely.
I think he got it absolutely bang on, the director.
Taika Waititi is absolutely wonderful as directing and as Hitler. And you're right. The two lads in the film, they kind of remind me of a young Nick Frost and Simon Pegg.
Oh yeah, they do, don't they? Now you've said that. Yeah, that's it. Simon Frost. Yeah, they could do a what happened to them later on one. Yeah. Anyone else? Anyone else seen Jojo Rabbit? And any comments on it?
Yeah, I think using something really simple, the shoes. That's the thing that really sticks in my mind. I thought it was absolutely brilliant, and I watched it just after it had come out, I think on DVD. And I was quite taken aback and saying to people, look, get your kids to watch this. I think they'd really enjoy it, because it gives them a way of the indoctrination side. It gives them the appreciation of how these kids were, perhaps. But the shoes definitely stuck out to me. Yeah,
Scarlett Johansson is fantastic in it as well. The bit where she plays her husband by sort of smearing charcoal.
That could have been a bad. I bet when she read that off the script, she thought, "I'm going to do what?" And that could have completely gone wrong.
Yeah.
Really, really well done. Because she had a great career when she started off. I mean, she was in the one with Bill Murray, the Lost in Translation. Then she kind of made some big blockbusters and stuff. But it proves she really can act, and she can do something when she wants to. Oh, it was a great performance. It really it's a worthy addition to our show. I think we've still got Robbie and me to go, and So we'll move it along. We can go back and discuss some things later on. George, you've been listening there quietly. Anything you've got to say along the way about the acting, particularly because you've been in a couple, you Band of Brothers and Lost Battalion you're in, of course. So anything when you're watching a film of any genre, but particularly a war film, do you look at it from an acting point of view, or do you just try and switch off and get the film?
I'm just trying to switch off and watch the film. It's funny. I'd made another film which is kind of a war film. It was called September Tapes. It was interesting because we shot it in Afghanistan, but that is what I get more comments on. Maybe because I was actually in it more than in Band of Brothers. So that just occurred to me. But I get quite a few comments from soldiers saying they like that film. But yeah, I just want to say Jojo Rabbit, what a brilliant film. I heard the same thing, Dan, that it was, sort of a throwaway coming of age story. And I was absolutely blown away when I saw it. So yeah, wonderful choice.
No, it's definitely a good choice. So we'll move on to Robbie and then we can come back and go around again. So Robbie, you've been waiting the second but from last.
Yeah.
So we'll do your big one or your less one.
The big one first and the obscure one after, if that's okay.
Sure.
Yeah. So my big film for me that everyone should know, Cruel Sea, 1953. This film for me, it's a bit of a personal, not in a kind of anyone in my family's in the Navy, but my dad is the #1 fan of this film, and I think it's the one film that I have seen more than any sort of military film. But I went against it for years. I was like, oh God, not this again. Not this film again. But when I hit maybe 25, maybe I'm 27 now, it makes me feel like I'm not that old, but anyway. But now I'm getting older. I really love it. I unashamedly think it's fantastic. If anyone doesn't know, it's a story of the crew of Flower class and then later Castle class corvettes being Atlantic convoy escorts in the Second World War, and it's more of a character study than a true gritty war film. And it is a gritty war film, but it's almost not about war. It's about the men fighting the war. And I love that about it. It's, take for instance there, you've got 3 of the biggest post-war stars in Jack Hawkins, Stanley Baker and Donald Sinden. And if those names don't sell the film alone, nothing else will. But in particular, Stanley Baker's portrayal of, got his name here, James Bennett. Oh, it's if it happened now. So I was thinking about it earlier. If anyone's seen Wolf of Wall Street, when Matthew McConaughey comes in and starts beating his chest, and he's only in it for maybe 10 minutes or so, if that happened today, that's Stanley Baker now. He would, for me, get an Oscar nomination for his possibly 20 minutes less screen time. Fantastic.
It's good.
And they go through the war. And for a film at the time, it's filmed at sea on the actual boat. It was called the Coreopsis, and it was an actual Flower class corvette used in the war. It was in Malta. It was going to be scrapped. Ealing Studios bought it. They renovated it, did it up a little bit, and it was filmed at sea. Donald Sinden's book and Jack Hawkins' book talk about filming it, at sea and things like that. But it's just fantastic. It's one of those British films that it may have fallen into obscurity, possibly, depends on your viewpoint, but for me, it always comes back up again when people talk about British cinema. You've had 1917, we've had Dunkirk, we've had a re-love of making movies about British experiences of the war. But if you want to choose one for the Navy, it's The Cruel Sea every time. And I don't think that any sort of naval film betters it, in my opinion.
I agree, and I think it, because I like Dan's comment about you can tell a film about the era it was made in as well as the era it's portraying, because to me, Cruel Sea has more of a late 60s mentality about it. It's not very heroic. If you think of the films it was coming out at, competing in the 50s, things like The Red Beret and Sea of Sand, and the one with another one with Dirk Bogarde going, They Who Dare, they're very kind of boys' own adventures. Colditz story. Colditz story is getting one over matron. There's no peril or danger in the Colditz story at all. It's a great film, but you don't sense that anyone's going to die. It's always just, we're going to get out of the way from the boss and get back to Blighty. And the Cruel Sea. I mean, I like the fact you get, because I mean, the Greyhound. At the end of Greyhound, Tom Hanks has like sunk 4 submarines in half an hour or something, isn't he?
Yeah.
And yet the Cruel Sea, they go through like the 4 wars, and they've hit one sub and maybe hit another one. It ends with this. Actually, we were doing a very boring job for a lot of the war, and we didn't come back with some big tally and brace of medals. We were just doing our job, and I think it sort of sits out of era. But of course, based on an incredible book by Montserrat, which is classic. Anyone else got any comments on Cruel Sea?
Yeah, I only watched it because people were talking about the Tom Hanks movie and comparing the two. So I thought, all right, I'll go and watch the Cruel Sea finally. And like you said, they don't let you assume what happened in the movie. He says at the end, we sunk 2 subs in 4 years.
Yeah.
And you think, it's a war movie. Not everything is action and exciting and all those sorts of things. Sometimes it's dull and boring and it stretches on and on and on. But all those character stories fill in what people might be tempted to throw action in to just I don't know, do something else, but it is an acting movie, not an action movie.
People have been discussing all sorts of other movies while we've been talking. The Devil's Brigade has come up, but Katie Maguire just said the Cruel Sea's conscious decisions of what not to show on screen is what makes it. And I think I would agree with that.
That's my wife, actually.
Oh, yeah, well, okay, of course it is. Yeah, what you don't see is as important as what you do see.
Yeah,
And well, the Greyhound,
the depth charging the people in the water.
Yeah,
that scene, the way that's, sorry to interrupt, Adam. Yeah. The way that scene is shot, you've got the V of the sights of his like his little range finding thing on the deck, and you see the shot of him seeing the men in the water through that thing, and the weight on his face is just so much. And then he shouts, "Is fire!" and you get Donald Sinden, fire 1, and they let the depth charges go, and then you get this. It's beautiful cinema if anyone hasn't seen it. You get the shots of the men who they've previously saved and the crew just watching men up and down in the water, and then it goes silent, and then one of the enlisted men just goes to a little section of the boat, looks directly at the bridge, and shouts, "Bloody murderer!"
Yeah, it's very understated.
It's possibly the greatest scene in British cinema history for me.
Wow, that's a bold claim. I mean,
I know it's very. I mean, I'm very biased.
I mean, The Cruel Sea is a classic of British film, regardless of its war genre. To me, I mean, it's brilliant. And Donald Sinden, before Donald Sinden became the professional kind of Donald Sinden impersonator that he did of later years with the cravat. It was when Donald Sinden was still acting, and Virginia McKenna was in it as well, wasn't she? Which is great, but. In your second film, we'll bring that, which is a much more obscure. I think. So your second film.
The second film is a 1946 release called "Theirs Is the Glory," and it is the story of the men who tried to hold Arnhem.
Very good.
Operation Market Garden, and it's very different kind of film to The Cruel Sea and possibly every other film we've talked about tonight, in that every single man you see on screen was there. Every single thing you see on screen probably and definitely did happen the way it happened. No real actors. Brian Desmond Hurst, the director, had filmed The Lion Has Wings in the Second World War. He also filmed They Were Not Divided, which is a movie about the Armoured Corps in the Second World War, Tank Corps. And it was, I've got some facts here. Where did I put them? Here we go. Released on the 17th September 1946, the second anniversary of Market Garden. Filmed in Easter Beacon, Arnhem. So every single shot you see, that's where it was.
Yeah. And
it's very powerful because I'd only seen it when lockdown started. I was doing some research on Arnhem. and this movie came up, and I was like, why have I never heard of this? Why is it not in the same bracket as Bridge Too Far? And quite possibly one of the reasons I think that it actually tells the bloody story. It doesn't make the British out to be like inept, and it doesn't make the people who I made a video review of it and trying to think what I put, is it's a documentation of the men that were there, not the men that were responsible.
Yeah.
And I think that is the most powerful part of the film. And you've got people that reported on it. Stanley Maxted, the BBC war correspondent, he is, his reports are used in sections, and they're used in the context that they were reported in. And that just, it's more documentary than film when those parts come in. And I think that's the great thing about it. And I'll say one more thing until I could ramble on for hours about it. It's fantastic. But there's a scene where Richard Lonsdale has created Lonsdale Force to defend the Easterbeek perimeter, and he has his men in the church there.
Yeah.
And he is in the pulpit, and he, you know, it's only a couple of years after the fact, and he looks pretty much the same as he did. And the speech that he gives to his men, I mean, if you don't feel like you could fight on till the end of time after you've heard that speech, you never will. I've got a little quote from here, because it's, when I always watch it, I turn to my wife, I just go, wow. You know, it's we fought the Germans before in North Africa, Sicily, Italy. They weren't good enough for us then, and they bloody well aren't good enough for us now. And it's like, imagine hearing that. Paratrooper, you've been fighting way longer than you should have. You may be down to the last magazine of your Sten gun, and this man gets up on it in a pulpit in a church and gives you that speech. I mean, God, you'd be, you know, you'd be willing to fight to the death for this man, and they did.
Yeah.
You know, it's
although on balance, maybe was that a right thing to do? I don't know. I mean, it was,
yeah, exactly.
At the time, I mean, you know, it's hard to get beyond the rather crappy acting. But as you said, none of them were actual actors. But lots of, shall I bring my rifle over, sir? It's a bit.
Yeah.
It's all a bit. Still,
Take
there's a tank coming down the road, sir.
Yeah.
But you know, it is what it is, and the fact you was filmed on location is unquestionably what makes it. And the real guys and the bunker beds at the end with the guys in at the beginning starts off with them going.
Yeah,
great.
Shot is an incredible staging. Just from a shot perspective of a movie, it's very matter of fact. You know, at the start, the men are there learning about it, then they're there, then they're not there at the end, and you're like, well, how many of them actually made it back?
I mean, I think we've covered some really complex and a real variety of films from 40s up to last year, which is quite interesting. I mean, I could have easily had people all just choose the big 60s blockbusters, and that would have been interesting enough. I think we've been quite diverse in that, and I guess I'll do my two, and then we can round anything up. So I've cheated a bit with my first choice, because my first choice, it wasn't a big film for rest of us, but it was in Finland. It is Talvisota, which was Finland's biggest ever World War II film, and broke all their box office records for any type of film. It's 1990, I think, and there's a short version and a slightly long. It's a bit like Das Boot in it. There's like a cinema cut, and there's a slightly longer extended when they broke into two. And it's about the Winter War of 1940, when, you know, Finland are on their own against Russia, and it is really, really good. What can I say? It's just a cracking film. And you know, there are some people I know who don't like films with subtitles, and you know, to me, it's called the Finnish called it the Finnish Saving Private Ryan. It was that big in their movie history that it got that you know, name. And to me, I watch it once a year. It's still you have to get back. It's a very slow start, but the payoff of the slow start is that when you get to know, when you start to see the characters die later on, the time you've spent with them at the beginning is worth having spent. There's lots of, when the war hasn't quite started yet, going back and forth, and there's even a Finnish cliched sauna scene where they're in there bashing each other with birch sticks. It's anyone else seen Talvisota or the Winter War? Adam has.
Yeah.
What did you think of it, Adam?
Yeah, I haven't seen it for a long time now. I used to have it on VHS when people owned those, but that's since gone. I haven't replaced it But yeah, I do remember a very slow start. But those guys were tough in miserable conditions.
Yeah, and the other thing I found, I still find it, because if you were a Finnish cinema goer, you would know by the status of the actors which one's going to be in it longer than the other ones, because you know that if you see a movie today with Tom Hardy, you know he's not going to die in the first scene. You normally, you know, but because I don't know Finland's acting world, some of the characters that ended up surviving were the ones I wouldn't have put my money on at the beginning because I don't know who they are. But then when you realize, oh, hang on, it does make sense. He was the well-known star, that one. But as a neutral, you're just investing in the characters. And I think that made it work for me more. Because if you see a film now and Matt Damon is headlining or whatever, you know he's unlikely to die in the first scene. Although the case they throw a weird cameo into modern film. But
unless it's Sean Bean, of course.
Sean Bean, you know, in fact, when Sean Bean doesn't die, that's when you stand. What, really? He hasn't died? I mean, how many times he died in films? Never died as sharp, though. So that's Telvis. So that's my first one. My second film is it's not a brilliant film, but it nearly is, and it's The Long Days Dying, which starred David Hemmings, Tom Bell, Tony Beckley. And Beckley, and I know George knows Nolan, David's son, and Nolan Hemmings looks exactly like his late father. And it's an experimental film from 1969 about British paras. And what's interesting, coming off Robbie's choice of Theirs Is the Glory, is that you're not even sure in the film whether it's meant to be Normandy or Arnhem. They don't, or even Crossing the Line. They don't tell you where it's set. There's no big battle. The cast is only 4. There are 3 British paratroopers and 1 German. And it's set in it was obviously filmed in a state. I know it was filmed in an estate, West London somewhere, and it was very low budget. Peter Collinson was the director. Tony Beckley was in The Italian Job. If you're wondering where you've seen him, he was in The Italian Job, and he was the second lead. And Tom, and there's David Hemmings there. And what the idea I really liked about it, which I wish I could say worked perfectly in a film, but it didn't work, but it nearly worked. The 3 characters, the 3 paras, have a kind of a telepathy. It's really hard to explain, but there's very little dialogue. And the reason there's very little dialogue, in fact, is they actually had really bad sound on set. So they didn't the actors went in and narrated their thoughts. And you get this bit like where David Hemmings is going out on patrol and he's thinking, you're hearing his thoughts, thinking, I know, so the corporal's got this covered. The corporal, and you hear the corporal, yeah, I've got you covered. And they're engaging in a conversation, yet it's done with their thoughts. And it nearly works really well, but it doesn't quite work because I think it was too new, if that makes any sense at all. I've spoken to Nolan about it, David's son, and he's not very knowledgeable about what about the film and how the film came about. And this is the same year or the year before David Hemmings did Charles the Light Brigade. So he went from doing an absolutely huge, enormous, massive, great budget classic war film to this weird little low budget thing. But it's what, despite its faults, I come back and watch it again and again and again. You can buy it on Amazon Prime. Unfortunately, it's a horrible pan and scan 4:3 version of what was shot in CinemaScope, and the colors are really washed out. So you're not getting the full director's vision. But to me, it is a brilliant film because it's trying to do something really, really new. And I've met a lot of combat veterans, and Adam, you've interviewed lots of veterans. I'm not saying they had a telepathic connection, but they definitely had a bond that only being in combat with other men can give you. I remember Earl McClung, who was in Band of Brothers, telling me, and this is about war films. He was sitting in Normandy. He said they should make a war film about the love for combat soldiers for each other. And we looked at him and he went, I don't mean Brokeback Mountain in khaki, he said. I said, I mean a film about the fact that men in combat love each other. And Earl was really funny and just very witty. But to me, this Long Days Dying film gives this suggestion of these 3 men who've been operating together for so long, they now can read each other's thoughts. And to me, that challenging idea of it. And in the film, there's leaves on the ground. So that's why part of me thinks it's Arnhem, because of the time setting, but then part of me thinks it might meant to be Normandy. But the point is, it doesn't really matter where it, it's one of those films a bit like Cross of Iron, which I thought someone was going to nominate, in that I think they ran out of budget to finish the film. So the film finishes with an explosion and a fade to black, and you get the impression it was because they had no more money left to get another can of film. It seems somehow unresolved. And Peter Collinson, I don't think did many films after it. Anyway, I really recommend for those on the panel and those watching it, go and give it a look, because you'll appreciate it, and you'll realize it doesn't quite come off. It nearly comes off, but David Hemmings is brilliant, and there's some nice little details about he's got like a snare in the pocket of his Denison smock to go and get rabbits and stuff, and that. The equipment, there was a guy on the advisor on it had obviously been a para and told them where they stowed things in their smocks and stuff, and what equipment they had, and there's some really nice details like that I think you'd have to have known the mentality of a para to put that stuff in there. But yeah, that's my second choice. Long Days Dying and Talvis Sota. I nearly was going to go for The Great Escape, but I thought it's too obvious. So that's my two choices there. I'm assuming none of you have seen The Long Days Dying.
No, I've not seen it. I like your point about the camaraderie. I mean, that's what the veterans I've spoken to, I've interviewed. It's what it's what they were fighting for. It's not Queen or King and country. It's they're fighting for the mates, and that's we spoke a little bit earlier about what makes people break down, and again, it's more often than not it's a grief. It's when your support has gone and when your mates are all dead. That's the last straw.
We could talk about it at another time, but one of those things that kind of annoys me about, and George has been here in Normandy anniversary time, is the veterans sometimes feel the need to give very worthy speeches about why they were fighting in wars. And it's because they think that's what people want. They want to say, they say that I was here because democracy was threatened and I had to go and do my bit to bring back freedom to Europe. And the reality is, and I can include the veterans I knew very well, they were actually fighting, as you said there, Dan, for the guy on their left and their guy on their right, and most of them were drafted. I mean, there's some volunteers. They weren't necessarily fighting for a better world. They were fighting to not get killed and for the guys beside them. They added, a lot of them, this idea of what they were fighting for when they got older and understood it.
Definitely,
and that only applies to World War II, because other wars, if you can tell me what any of the wars since World War II were genuinely about, then you're a better man than me, because most of them to me are somewhat ridiculous. And I get very frustrated as a tour guide and a guy. I run my World War II TV channel, but I get very frustrated when people think I'm some kind of fucking war junkie, because I'm absolutely not. I wish there could have been a way of us sorting out our problems without having to go to war, and I very much appreciate talking about the heroism of these guys, but I also never missed the opportunity to tell them about how broken they were when they came back home, and how the world they fought for often wasn't better than the world they went away from, and how my British relatives who fought in World War II came back to unemployment and poverty and no GI Bill. And so I try. I'm on my bandwagon now. I'm on my soapbox now. But I'm not a war junkie, and I get people who. So you must like guns, then? I said, no, not really, not particularly. Guns are the things that kill people. I can admire a Denison smock. I can wear a military jacket every now and then, a flying jacket, but I don't like war. I like talking about war. I like learning about war, because I understand that that's how you learn about history and you learn about ourselves. But I'm on a ramble there. But with regards to war films, because we'll wrap things up, but an open question really, what place do war films have, if any, in educating people about warfare? Should we try and give them that, or should we just accept their pure entertainment like westerns and science fiction films? Why do we expect more from our war films? Anyone want to answer that or comment on that?
I use the two films for teaching.
Right.
Obviously, and I've alluded to that by saying the choices offered by the Holocaust, which might sound a strange way of looking at the way the Holocaust worked, but the choices offered by the Holocaust to people like Oskar Schindler and Oskar Dillewanger, and they, revealed the kind of things that were going on about people, those who worked against the Holocaust, those who went with it, those who profited, those who died, and you see a story. And the films that I used are Come and See and Schindler's List. There is a third one, which hasn't been mentioned, which is Brest-Litovsk, where the Soviet soldiers hang out and fight constantly in a very vicious battle, which is memorialized in Russia. And it's one of those moments where the Germans appear not to be able to cope in the midst of all these victories with these people who are standing and refusing to give in. And I think that's not so much gratuitous violence and war, it's showing that the determination of a people to stand up to what's happening to them. And so I think films have a role in study. And I know many academics, many of my colleagues use films on their reading lists. And it's important for students, I think, to use them. As someone's already said, they're not only a signifier of the time, they're telling us about what people were thinking, and we're adjusting to that in an ever-changing world. And I think these films are very important. They're not just about the culture we lived in back then, but they're telling us something about ourselves now.
Yeah. I don't want to put you on the spot, George, but George, you were part of Band of Brothers, which it's not a film, it's a TV show, but it is one of everybody's top 5 war films, and you've been to anniversary events and things like that. And I know, because I know you quite well, George. You're my brother. I love you, my man. But what do you feel any guilt or there's a balance between guilt and pride about being attached to something like that? Because you've had people coming up saying, I'm a fan of Band of Brothers. They come in all shapes and sizes, don't they? So what's your feelings about being attached to something like that is so big about World War II?
No, it's a privilege, really, on all the things I've got to do because of it, and the experience of making it, and the whole thing. I mean, we went to it's the year before last where we had the concert in Con. I don't know if you came, Paul, or not.
Yeah, I was there. Yeah. When
all those young boys, all the soldiers coming up to the guys who they recognized and sort of saying how much it meant to them and stuff was just, it's amazing. But I'd like to recommend a couple more films if you guys haven't seen them.
Yeah.
There's one called Ninth Company, because I'm so grateful to all of you. I've been making the list of films I haven't seen here, so I've got a really nice list. But there's a Russian one called Ninth Company that's about Afghanistan, and it's pretty good. And there's another Russian one called Brat, which is B-R-A-T, which is about a guy who comes back from Afghanistan and what he does in Moscow. I wouldn't say it's as good, but they're just 2 interesting films.
Well, I don't know either of those ones. I mean, yeah,
I think you'll really like Ninth Company, I think.
I've heard of it. I've definitely heard of it, but I've not seen it yet. But I mean, war films have that extraordinary ability to get people fired up in different ways, aren't they? That some people just love the action and the oh, look at the aircraft doing this, look at the tanks doing that, and those kind of people scare me a little bit. If you're using it purely for entertainment, surely you've got to see something bigger. I mean, I can enjoy a war film, but anyone else got any comments on why do we put these expectations on war films?
I mean, I would argue that, like, depends on the subject matter, but I think now more than ever, I think it's more important to start making more big budget war movies in the old style of looking at these men that were just there as studies of the period and stuff, because we're going to get to a point where there will be no one left to talk about it to. And then I think we're going to possibly have a generation of kids who can only really engage through games and films and music and things, because it seems like the way it's all going, personally, just as probably youngest person on the panel, but my earliest memory of a war film is Saving Private Ryan. I wore that video out, and it was like the nucleus in my brain was like, right, this is something you're going to be interested in. So from it, I went and learned about D-Day. I went and learned about the American experience of the Second World War. And then from films such as The Cruel Sea and things like that, I learned about the British experience. So I think for starting a spark, they're really, really good if they catch you right. And I think a film can do that. It can capture your head And to mention 1917, I went to see it with a friend from work when I did work, and he was he's not very au fait on war or First World War, and he knew that I was, and he was looking at me going, what is that, right? What's going on here? What were they doing? And I was like, well, possibly for him, seeing a film like that was like an eye-opener, because he had no idea that men went through that, or that we got to a point in our past where we thought, you know what, we're going to dig loads of trenches and we're going to lob shells at each other for 4 years, and we're probably not going to learn much and do it and again in the next 20 years time.
Yeah.
And if for me, if that movie made him go away and just check if his family had a member in the services in the First or Second World War, I think that movie did enough. I think it did its job, because surely somewhere in Hollywood land, someone's still batting for we're making these movies to make a point. We're making them to make money. Let's not beat around the bush. They're making money, but somewhere somebody is batting for the guys that, the memory of it all.
I think so. You'd hope so.
Surely, but that's my sixpence.
Sally, you've been very quiet for a while, so you're the only one among, Adam was police, but you were a veteran. So war movies, why do we put more pressure on war movies to be authentic? And what's your feeling?
I actually agree with what's just been said, that as we lose people who were actually there at the time, who can engage with and talk about their experiences, as we lose that, then we need something that is as close to the real thing, not close to the real thing, but accurate as possible. So that, yes, books are brilliant, and but I think, as you said, that so many films go off on so many different tangents, and I found I struggled with I thought it was very good, but I struggled with the adaptation of Dunkirk just because of all the music and things like that. But I think that's just me. I don't like loud noise or anything like that anymore. But definitely remake some of the ones that people wouldn't watch now because they are so antiquated, and maybe just bring them up, bring them to life, and add more to them, more depth to them, perhaps.
Yeah, I wish it would happen.
I'm affected by films. I go into the cinema and I have to walk out sometimes because I can't be doing with the noise, the flashing lights and everything like that, but that's indicative of having MS. But I have been to the cinema with friends who have literally got up and walked out because the experience in the cinema is just too much. But I don't know, it's what's going to grab people's attention, really, and educate them.
Well, that's the thing. I was at Chalk Valley History Festival with James Holland last year, and all those amazing authors and historians who wrote their brilliant books about history of all different periods. And the thing is, the reach of a movie like 1917 or Dunkirk or Saving Private Ryan is beyond all of those books combined, as is the reach of like Call of Duty or the video games. So that, whether we like it or not, movies are going to be a huge part of people's, I'm going to use the word, understanding of warfare, or attempt to understand warfare, whether we like it or not. Anyway, Lance, who's trying to get the Pegasus Bridge movie off the ground, has been for years. He'll tell you about the struggles he's had going to British people, film companies saying, I want to do a series or a film about the British on D-Day, and no one's biting. No one wants to put the money in behind it. They'd rather do something else that is a surefire hit. So I don't know how many war films will have coming out that aren't that are of the old school. I don't know. We'll see. But well, I think we've been at this 2.5 hours. It's been long enough for everybody, I think. So there's been some interesting chats going on the sidebar there. People agree with some of our trailers. Lots of other films have been put in there as suggestions as well. We're certainly enough to do another one of these in the future if we wanted to. But anyone else want to make any films that we should have discussed, or are you regretting your choice? Anybody any final comments about anything they wish they brought up, or another film? Or
I think for a movie, like you said, it has a certain reach and it gets to a certain number of million people that a book won't. but that movie might lead them to that book.
Yeah.
And to a greater and a better understanding of what they only gave 2 hours to before.
Yeah.
And if that movie is the hook that gets them in to be more knowledgeable and to appreciate those events with a better understanding, then I think that's good.
And that's more important than questions of accuracy. I mean, I'll take your point of aircraft acting as other marks. Yeah, the fact that we have people who then argue about, you know, how many rounds of ammunition a Spitfire could carry over the beaches of, the fact that people are arguing that is you know, their interest has been piqued by watching a film, and they've gone and studied it some more and become more knowledgeable, and that's the most important thing that I think film's going to do. You're not going to learn about history from a film, apart from the hour and a half, 2 hours that's shown on screen. It's the role of a film is to get you to be interested and pick up a book or to talk to somebody else. That's
absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. And that's what happened. I happen to love 1917. I've got great friends of mine who hated 1917, and I liked Dunkirk, and friends didn't like Dunkirk. But the point is, I have this habit of when these big films coming out of looking at how the book sales go up on Amazon. I put little record. I saw, for example, Joshua Levine's book on Dunkirk went up many places about Dunkirk after the movie came out. In 1917, books about the Somme and Passchendaele, I just record them and I watch them going up the charts. So that's always going to be good. If people go and use it as a springboard to something else, that's great. And that's what these films do. These brilliant films and these brilliant TV shows, they do. So, well, I think that was quite a lot of fun. I enjoyed that. It wasn't as many laughs as we had in the crappy war films because it was a slightly more serious subject. But I think actually people will be surprised at the worthiness of the conversation at places. I think we actually got quite deep there, which has surprised me. So in terms of how I'll say goodbye to our guests in a minute, but in terms of housekeeping, I've got a show from Gold Beach tomorrow at 12 p.m. French time, 11 a.m. British time about Gold Beach with Ben Main. And then Monday, I'm very excited about Monday. We've got our Being a World War II Historian panel coming up with an all-female lineup, which we're not bang on about, but that is the whole point of it. Is it's going to be giving a voice to the historians from that side of the arena and the problems and they faced. I'm really looking forward to that show. So that'll be really exciting. So it remains me to say thank you to the two people left out, Stephen Hall and Matthew Leitch, and I hope Matthew's got his washing machine sorted out. And you haven't seen. When did you last see Matt, George? You're muted, George. You're muted.
It's been a while. I've seen him on video and I've spoken to him, but in the flesh, I couldn't tell you. Probably 5 years or so. Yeah, too long.
He couldn't get Zoom working back in March for the big history hack things. We kept trying, but he couldn't get Zoom to work. Otherwise, he'd have been there. But so those two, George, my love to you in Beirut, and hope things pick up for you there soon. I can't wait to see you back in Normandy again and hoist a few beers with you again, because
thank you.
I love you, George. We miss you. Mag sends you a big hug, and I love you, George. Yeah. Robbie, for your tender years, you are very knowledgeable about this stuff, which is great. Sally, great perspective from the about the aviation. Phil, your knowledge about the Belarus and stuff, what you gave to us about Come and See was fantastic. Dan, I really liked your approach and about the PTSD. That was really good. And Adam, you just know your stuff about aviation. So yeah, I think we did a good job there tonight. So thank you very much. If you have enjoyed watching World War II TV, don't forget our Patreon channel. You can help bung a few quid our way. I've had 4 tours this year out of instead of my normal 120. So I've sold one kidney, but I need the other one. So I try to sell my liver, but they don't want it. It's too badly gone. So anyway, thanks everybody for watching. This has been Paul Woodadge for World War II TV. I'm ending the stream now. We'll see you all again very soon. Thank you very much. Good evening.
Thank you, everyone. Bye. Thanks. Nice to meet you.
Bye.